Oh, hello. I didn't hear you break in. Don't touch my food. I'm just trying to learn some basic hydrodynamics. It's not going well. I can't read. But you know what is going well? My partner Mint Mobile's limited time sale. Until October 31st, if you sign up for Mint Mobile's special offer, you can get their excellent unlimited premium wireless package for only $15 a month. That means you can get a phone plan with unlimited data for only $15 a month and be part of the largest 5G network in America. With the money you save, you can buy your doggo more toys. There are no surprise fees, it takes only a few minutes to sign up, and you can even keep your current phone number if you'd like. It's even easier than eating peanut butter. I like peanut butter. To help support the channel through my partner Mint Mobile, check the link in the description or go to mintmobile.com/crimson to sign up before Halloween so you can save a bunch of money on your phone bill. And next time you break in, bring snacks. I like snacks. You know, I've read quite the variety of books for this channel. I've read ones that had some degree of potential, just a little sloppy in the execution. I've had books that were kind of bordering some decent potential and just completely dropped the ball entirely. I've read books that were so bad they're actually kind of enjoyable. I've read books that were absolutely enraging. But I can't recall the last time I've read a book that was so devoid of content that I actually honestly forgot that I read it. The Misses is the latest assault on the English language from E.L. James, and it has got to be one of the most pointless books I've ever come across. I'm not exaggerating when I say about a month ago I was done reading The Misses, and a little bit of time went by. I was doing some research on the book and trying to think of how to schedule things for the channel. And I realized, oh, I've got to start reading a new book because I don't have anything in the works right now. Only then to come back and realize, wait, I haven't filmed anything for The Misses. That's right. I have read a book. I need to film a review now. You see, I liken it to this. There is a concept known as white room torture. It's where you're put in a blank, expressionless room. There's nothing on the walls. There's no real substance in the room. We're talking like bare furnishing as much as possible, and everything is white. White bed sheets, white mattress, white desk, white sink, stuff like that. You are left with so little detail, so little color in the room that you're effectively snowblind. And there's plenty of ample lighting so that it all kind of blends together, and you don't even have shadows to really work with. There are no windows, there are no timepieces anywhere, so you can't observe the passage of time at all. You are left in this blank, empty room with nothing to engage your brain with. And that is very much what reading The Misses feels like. I have never enjoyed E.L. James as an author. I don't think that she has any potential or talent as a writer.
What do they want?
What do they want?
Your readers?
They just want a good tale. They want a ripping yarn.
You wrote some really disturbing fan fiction.
But at this point, she has somehow reached new depths with The Misses. Not in terms of how provocative or offensive or even damaging this book is, just how perplexing it is. Like, what's the point? Because The Misses is a book without a story. Now, it does pick up almost immediately after the last book, The Mister, where you had weird sex object heartthrob Maxim Trevelyan, the Earl of Trevithick, some made-up aristocrat in England. He meets the maid Alesia, who was trafficked into England and found refuge in his arms, and they fell in love for some undiscernible reason. And some stuff happened, and eventually they wound up in Albania, where he proposed to her after knowing her for less than 2 months. And that is actually confirmed. They know each other less than 2 months in this book, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, I won't call the end of the Mr. good or even decent. I will call it serviceable within the context of what it was in the story as a whole. It was a happy ending, boy gets the girl in the end, whatever. But The Misses was built on the idea of this continuing the Cinderella story. What happens once the glass slipper fits?
It's Cinderella! I demand you stop this instant!
Why did you make them tear my clothes off? All you had to do was ask, stepmom.
What are you doing, stepdaughter?
Well, in terms of broad context, I do think there's something you can do with that, because there's always got to be some continuation after the classic Disney and they lived happily ever after thing. I mean, considering all the straight-to-DVD movies they've come out with on that exact concept, you can see that there's at least some potential for a market. But the difference is, in all of those straight-to-DVD Disney sequels, there's at least a story. Something goes on. There is no story in this book. It's actually maddening. I once said that The Mister was 150 pages of story spread out over 500 pages. This is 5 pages of story spread out over 450. This story is more diluted than your standard homeopathic medicine. And that's not to say that there's nothing you could have done with The Misses. There were still some unresolved plot threads and ideas from The Mister. For example, The Misses could have played around with the ideas of cultural differences as Alesia gets used to England and Maxim gets used to Alesia's routine. There could have been trouble regarding Alesia's trauma and Maxim not having enough time to care for her thanks to his new responsibilities as an earl, since he's replacing his brother who died in the last book. There's the matter of the criminal trial of the bad guys who trafficked Alesia into England from the last book, which would bring Alesia's immigration status into question. There's Maxim getting used to marital life and not having the same freedom that he was used to, and Alesia not being sure how to be a wife because she's never had a serious relationship before. These are all ideas that James could have used as a central plot idea in the story. But while these elements do kind of appear in the book, they're more of a garnish than anything else. You'll have a sprinkling of tension as Alesia's not sure how to be a wife. You have a pinch of some issues regarding Alesia's immigration status because she lost her passport, and there's this minute plot thread, this wafer-thin plot thread regarding the legality of their marriage. And I think I know what James was trying to go for. It feels like she was trying to construct a soap opera with intriguing characters and the occasional hint of some back and forth, some minor conflict that tips the scales a little bit, but not too much. You know, the reason things like Downton Abbey work as well as they do is because you've got engaging plot lines, you've got charismatic, compelling characters. And sometimes you've got plot threads that pop up and are not resolved within a single episode. There's an entire plot line, season-long plot line, if I recall correctly, about the valet Bates, who may or may not have murdered his wife. Oh my god, how's all that going to conclude? And that's compelling because Bates is a good man with, you know, this unfortunate downtrodden life, the leg injury and the abusive ex. But we don't have any characters that are nearly on that level. No one is engaging, no one is compelling. I don't like these characters. Some of them are completely detestable. Maxim's mother makes an appearance, and oh boy, I don't know what James was going for with that. Like, this book feels, it's so phoned in that James might have actually written this using AI. It feels completely soulless. And that's partially evidenced by the summary on the back of the book. Maxim Trevelyan, reluctant Earl of Trevithick, has pursued the woman he loves to the wilds of Albania. They never go outside the city in Albania. I don't know what she's referring to with the wilds of Albania. This is a bit of a dig, but it feels like she's saying that Albania is some savage, backwater, underdeveloped country or something. Considering some of the comments from the last book where Alesia is perplexed by the concept of a credit card, that might be the case. I don't know. She said in an interview that she went to Albania twice when researching the Mister, And she says that she liked the country, but it doesn't read like that. It doesn't read like she respects it at all. And it's the same thing in this book. Albanians in The Misses are portrayed as this weird, backwards, foreign people whose culture we never really get invited to explore. As soon as they get back to England, Alesia being from Albania is something of a non sequitur. It never really comes back up in any substantial matter. Having fought for and won her, he now has to wed her at the sharp end of a shotgun. First off, unless you've got a bayonet on your shotgun, where's the sharp end? Also, way to completely undermine the romance of the book. Now, instead of being this moment of affection between two people, it sounds like Maxim is saying yes, because if he doesn't, he's gonna get shot in the head. But perhaps one of the most perplexing elements is the concept of erotica. After all, that's what the last book was. And really, how much of a plot do you need when the story is just a cheap excuse for smut? So in that way, I could understand a wafer-thin plot as long as it led to some decent sex scenes. There are no decent sex scenes in this book. In fact, what's surprising is that there's only 3 moments where sex is actually described between these two, and you've got to go 100 pages in just to get to the first one.
It needs tits, Jerry!
And even then, they're so vaguely described, I can probably read 1 or 2 scenes out loud and not worry about demonetization. After page 200 or something, there are no real sex scenes. I think there's one at the very end, but again, there's no detail in it. You have more moments where these two are implied to have slept together than anything else. You've got moments where they're waking up cuddled next to each other, or where Maxim's recalling his last time with Alesia in the shower or something like that. There's nothing to sink your teeth into. There's nothing to engage the reader with. I am serious when I ask anyone who enjoyed The Misses and E.L. James's writing, please reach out to me and explain what the fuck this book did for you. And I could get into the romance if there was at least something there, but the characters are so bland. And I'm not opposed to romance. Toradora is an adorable series. I love that one. But just like I complained in The Mister, Maxim and Alesia have no chemistry between the two of them. There's nothing going on pulling these two characters together. Something which is not helped when you understand how rushed this courtship was. The entirety of the relationship can be defined by a weekend in Cornwall. And it's such a shame because an odd couple story could really work in this situation where Maxim realizes that he was so overcome by lust that he went and got engaged to a woman he barely knew, and Alesia could realize that Maxim is just this flirtatious playboy who doesn't really understand what goes into a relationship, and there could be some real tension there. There could be an engaging story as you explore these two. But instead, James doesn't do any of the work and just assumes that you're already into it and leaves all of the heavy lifting for the reader to unconsciously do. They're in love. Work done. On her own website, James says that she writes provocative romance. What's provocative about this? I can't even remember most of the book. And what's romantic about it? These two, like I said, have no chemistry. Just having 2 wet sandbags say I love you at each other doesn't really constitute a romantic story.
I love you, wife.
Unironically, play that clip about 100 times and you understand what it's like to read this book. It's about that fulfilling. This book is definitely, without question, worse than The Mister. The Mister at least had some elements that I can still recall. Now, while the book is as unengaging as physically possible, I'm going to do my best in order to keep this video light and entertaining, which is why I have been pulling a lot of references from E.L. James's polar opposite, Cat Icarus.
Yes! We're going to the crack house!
Cat Icarus is fun, engaging, sometimes informative, and actually puts an amount of effort into his product, unlike L. James. If you haven't, you should totally subscribe to his channel. And that's not to say that I cannot enjoy a casual, low-stakes story. For example, I just finished reading this one. This video's recommended book is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. Now, this was a surprisingly fun read for me. It's just a story about an orc who used to go on adventures and now just wants to open a coffee shop. So she opens a coffee shop. That's the story. It doesn't sound like it would be that fun or engaging a story, but you watch as the orc, Viv, will just come up with new ideas for coffee. Because, like, she's got the faintest idea of what she's doing as far as running a shop, but, like, it's obvious that she's very, very new to this style of business. So she keeps making small mistakes. She opens up the shop with 2 types of coffee and no food. So she's got to start making food. She's got to add a stage for entertainment. She's got to hire some help to help run the whole place. Eventually, the kitchen starts getting too hot, so she's got to find a way to vent things properly. And those are the sorts of low-stakes problems that don't sound like they would be fun to read about, but the characters are so engaging and so compelling that you can't help but root for them. This actually is really cute, and I think the sequel's coming out soon, so I am absolutely getting a copy of that myself. Also, one final note before we get started. So there was someone who wrote a quick blurb when The Misses finally came out and said, you know, like, this is the next great read by L. James. You know, check out my review here. And someone below that tagged me, Miss Random 88. She tagged me and said, "Hey Crimson, review time." Well, E.L. James liked that tag, and I don't think she's gonna like this video. And that's enough foreplay. Let's find out why The Misses is such a vapid, pointless book. The book opens to a dream, and this is a dream in which Maxim is recalling the time he went to the morgue to identify his older brother's body. My footsteps echo an urgent beat on the hard reflective floor, and I squint beneath the unremitting light of the fluorescence. It's not a bad opening line. I mean, you get a clear image of what's going on, and it kind of expands from there, so you do get something of an environment from this opening line. It isn't very memorable or anything, and it's attached to characters I don't care about. And that is the closest thing to a compliment I will have for this book for quite a while. And the dream kind of unfolds. It's got a twist where Maxim is looking down at the table, sees his brother's body, and all of a sudden it's actually him on the slab. And he sees this as his brother's spirit saying, "Hey, you got this." Probably in reference to the whole earldom thing. That moment in and of itself is kind of inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, especially with some of the revelations that we will get about Kit later in the book, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Maxim wakes up and he is in Kooks in northern Albania. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Kooks. Such a silly word.
And he's at Alesia's parents' place, and Alesia is curled up against him. Maxim goes back to sleep and wakes up shortly after, realizing that, considering how traditional Alesia's parents are, they're not going to appreciate the two of them sleeping next to each other before they're married. And this gets Maxim to think about Alesia's father and who he is as a person. Well, he did say she's my problem now. I shake my head as I shut the door, angered by the thought. Alesia's not my problem, for fuck's sake. She's a woman who knows her own mind. How could he even think that? It grinds my gears. Culturally, her dad and I are poles apart, and as much as I want to be respectful to him, he needs dragging into the 21st century. So, Maxim's not wrong in his assessment, but the problem is he's not the guy to deliver this message.
You're not that guy. You're not that guy.
Keep in mind that Maxim, about a month ago, was the kind of guy who effectively just saw women as sex objects and was banging his dead brother's wife. his recently dead brother's wife. So he is in fact correct in what he's saying, but he's not the one to take the moral high ground. And Maxim just kind of goes back reflecting on how his dream meant that Kit was probably offering solidarity, which is interesting because even after reading this book and seeing Maxim supposedly at work for a few scenes, I still couldn't tell you what he really does. Manage property is the best I can really come up with, but outside of that, his job looks remarkably easy. Like, show up, sign some papers for a couple of minutes, and then go visit the countryside or something. Although the problem is we don't really have a good grasp on what Maxim's job actually is or how good he is at it.
Yo, Earl! What? Hey, you're fired, you butt!
We then get a scene from Alessia's perspective, and James has maintained the writing style she had from the Mister, which, I mean, is good. She should write that way, but I'm still perplexed why Maxim is written in first person and Alesia is written in third person. It's a stylistic oddity that I couldn't really explain. And we get a reminder that Alessia's parents believe that she is pregnant. It's part of the reason why she was allowed to break the engagement with Babble, whatever his name was. The douchebag that stuffed her in her trunk in the last book and kidnapped her from England back to Albania. Alesia and her mother start talking, and we get this one scene here that does have some degree of character on display, but nothing really happens, and I think there is a strange art to be observed from this. When Alesia enters the kitchen, her mother looks up from kneading dough and studies her. "You look different," she says, setting the dough aside to rise. "Is it the clothes?" Alesia does a twirl. She's wearing a skirt, top, and cardigan from the collection that Maxim bought her in Padstow. "Yes, maybe, but you look more worldly." Her mother moves to the sink to wash her hands. "I am," Alesia replies quietly. She's been trafficked through Europe, been homeless, lived in one of the busiest cities in the world, and she's fallen in love. Then had all that snatched away from her as she was kidnapped and nearly attacked by her betrothed. Alesia shudders. Don't think of him. "Coffee?" her mother asks. "No sugar for me," she says as she sits at the table. Notice the abundance of nothingness that is occurring in this scene. Now, something to keep in mind is there is a way to explore characters through the minutia of their day-to-day. You know, getting up in the morning, getting dressed, getting breakfast and things like that can be ways to explore characters if you do it right. James's problem, though, is that her characters will do these things, but the moments don't stand out in any way. They take their coffee, they chat about small nothings, and then they decide, okay, you know what, today I'm going to go to the park. And then they sit and they sip at their coffee for another 20 minutes. That itself is not engaging. What you want to do in a situation like that is either have interesting characters that actually have something to discuss or something to really embed themselves in the plot, or in the example of Napoleon Dynamite, have the characters do something weird. Napoleon Dynamite is a great example of very minor tasks being done in ways that stand out. Signing up for a karate class, feeding a llama, going to class, and just engaging and existing in, I think it was high school. Napoleon was a standout character in that way. Instead of just like eating all of his tater tots at lunch, he put some in his pocket to save for later for class. That's weird. That stands out. Especially because he just put them right in his pocket and some dude smashed his foot up against his pocket. So it's like, it's a standout scene.
Come on, give me some of your tots.
No, I'm freaking starved. I didn't get to eat anything today. Oh, God. Gross. Freaking idiot.
And Napoleon Dynamite is largely a movie without a real connective story throughout it. It's a series of small vignettes that kind of culminate with Napoleon doing that dance for Pedro's class president election thing. I'm also a big fan of Bill Goldman's style of writing. as far as starting a scene as late as you can and finishing it as early as you can, because if you can master that, you are wasting none of the reader's time, and James does the opposite as much as physically possible. Case in point, The Princess Bride is that writing style done to perfection. If you were to apply that same method to the elements in this book, you would get this book down to a pamphlet. But we are barely started, we still have plenty to go. Maxim finally shows up for breakfast, and we get this line where Alesia gives him some coffee and then walks away. And Maxim observes, "She knows I'm ogling her and she likes it." Now, this moment in and of itself is not a bad thing, and the whole sex positive vibe that they're going for is, workable. But it doesn't really mesh considering Alessia's very recent trauma. She was just trafficked across Europe maybe 2 or 3 days ago. But all of that trauma is completely immaterial throughout the rest of the book. Just keep that in mind. I'm saving it for later. So it turns out that Alessia's father has a connection in a civil status office or whatever, and has arranged for the wedding to occur later that week, in 7 days on a Saturday. The problem with that, though, is that Maxim's not sure how legal the whole thing would be, or how legitimate it would all really come together. But he has a possible workaround. "Let's leave. You don't have to stay here. You're an adult. You're not beholden to your father, whatever he thinks. We can go to Tirana, get a passport for you and arrange a visa. Then we can fly back to the UK. We'll get married there, and your parents can join us for the wedding." Now, I don't know how long it would take to get a passport out of Albania, but this seems to be his go-to thought process for quite a while. We kind of get this weird blend where we're not exactly sure what Maxim's thought process is, because even though he wants to get married in the UK, he does kind of go along with the whole getting married in Albania thing, because, it's not a real country, or at least that's how he seems to treat it. They'll do a real wedding when they get to the UK. And believe it or not, that is going to be one of the longest running plot threads of the book. So in preparation for the actual wedding, Maxim goes out and goes drinking with Alessia's father, where he imbibes in the local intoxicant, stuff called Rocky. And he actually gets drunk under the table and kind of passes out at home, or at Alessia's home, and she has to undress him for bed. And we get this strange line: "My heart lurches in my chest. My girl undressed me and I was unconscious with drink. Hell, an opportunity wasted." Is Maxim disappointed that he didn't get molested?
I'm not going to molest you.
You don't love me!
Maxim has a conversation with Tom, the buddy that he brought with him on the rescue mission in the last book, who has actually been very sparse up to now. And Tom promises that he'll do whatever he needs to help with the wedding and all that stuff, because he wouldn't miss the high drama for the world. High drama? My scalp itches. Has he guessed we might abscond? "You've traveled to the back of beyond to save your lady." You see, it's lines like this that make me wonder what James's actual position on Albania as a country is. It doesn't sound like she likes it, although she keeps claiming that she loved it. And jumping ahead a bunch, some family members of Alessia's show up. We're talking like aunts and uncles and I think cousins, whatever, show up to help set everything up, because the wedding's going to be held at their place. But there's one extra knock, and Alesia goes to check the door. She skips up to the door and opens it and stops, shocked. "Hello, Alesia." The blood drains from her face as she stares at the man standing on the doorstep. "Abba dabba doo," she whispers as fear clogs her throat. So yeah, the douchebag that trafficked her back across Europe shows up, kind of assuming he'd be allowed near her. Well, Amway has shown up to apologize for everything, because he's had time to think over the last couple of days, and he feels so bad for the whole kidnapping and stuffing her in a trunk and dragging her out of a country and forcing her across half of Europe. Oh, at gunpoint for some of it, let's not forget that. And the tiny little matter of the whole almost sexual assault thing, so you know, all of that is very easily solved with a, "My bad, can we start over?"
Bing bong, hey, what's up? You're doing a bad job.
I know I'm doing a bad job.
Seriously, he spends like 2 pages begging for another chance. It's like, because Alesia is the most beautiful, maddening, and talented woman he's ever known. You shoved her in a trunk, dude. How can you marry someone that will take you away from your homeland? Our homeland. You are an Albanian woman to your soul. You will miss your mother. You'll never belong in England. The English are such terrible snobs. They'll despise you. They'll look down on you. You'll never be accepted there. That is the worst Eastern European accent ever recorded. So to say that alimony here is trying to gaslight Alesia is to undermine the very concept of gaslighting. It's like saying, gaslighting's not real. You made that up. Just the balls of this fucker. Now, wisely, Alesia does rebuff him and tell him to leave, but the notion that the English will despise you sticks with her for quite some time. Ash, stop messing with the tripod. Come here. Stop messing with the tripod. Fuzzbutt. And just like that, I am covered in cat hair. You shuttle us. Stop messing with the tripod! Stop. 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 Also, Alesia showed... Ash, I'm trying to work. Come here. Now, Alesia does show a lot of resilience to the fact that this guy was a very violent cretin towards her, but this is another bit of evidence in the whole James isn't really utilizing her trauma at all sort of a thing. Again, let's save that for later. Oh, now you're happy. Did I find the right spot? After her run-in, Alesia goes to Maxim for some comfort and tries seducing him a little bit, possibly as a way of coping with her troubles. Not an unheard of strategy, except it does kind of derail the moment in the story, but whatever. Maxim explains that he can't do anything though because he doesn't have any condoms, and when she suggests that he buy some, he says that he should, but it'll be odd if people thinks that she's pregnant and he's buying condoms. Ignoring the multitude of ways around that, like the fact that he could get Tom to buy condoms, or the fact that this is probably a large enough town that no one would recognize him. So they end up not doing anything. A little bit of teasing like this can be good for the sake of an erotica because it helps the reader's anticipation, builds up things a little bit.
I see you shiver with anticipation.
But that's not the only thing being built up. Reassured, I think she nods. I'd better go. Reluctantly, I release her, and with a lingering, thirsty look at me, she exits the bedroom, leaving me with a hard-on and a severe case of blue balls. The strange thing about this book, and we'll detail more of this later, is that at the very end of it, in the acknowledgement section, James thanked a number of people for help in research for the book, and this includes things like the challenges of farming in the UK. There was someone who gave expert advice on creating fine spirits, an element that barely shows up in the book, mind you, and a number of people who helped with the labyrinth of visa applications for those wishing to live with their loved ones in the UK. So there is some degree of research that James has done, and yet she can't look up the fact that a single occurrence doesn't really give guys blue balls. Like, it takes a while to get to that point, so she's researching the wrong things, especially for someone who claims to write provocative erotic romance. But considering that Maxim can't go out and just buy condoms, despite the multiple workarounds that they would have for that, she decides to take matters into her own hands. Alesia had managed to slip out in the late afternoon to the local clinic. After a brief conversation, she had persuaded the doctor to prescribe the contraceptive pill. She'd only just made it to the pharmacy with her prescription before it closed, and she'd been relieved not to recognize anyone there. She'd rushed home to continue cleaning, and no one asked where she'd been. Later, when her period started, she had been able to sneak upstairs and take her first pill. Now, there's something noteworthy that happens as a result of that, but we're going to save that for the honeymoon scene. In the next scene, Maxim can't sleep, so he decides to get some exercise. And it gives us a line that makes an element from the last book that I said was stupid much worse. I didn't even begrudge the shot of raki I had this evening to ease my aching muscles. Tomorrow morning, I'm going for a run before I do anything else, and I am grateful I packed my running gear. I criticized how Maxim didn't treat Alesia's kidnapping with any urgency. Let's not forget that once he learned that she was kidnapped and was being dragged back to Albania, his first thought was, okay, I gotta stop by the bank so I can pick up a ring, so I can propose to her. Now you're telling me that not only did he just not get on a plane immediately and whatever he's wearing, clothing be damned, he can buy something when he arrives. He went back to his apartment and started going through his drawers. I'm gonna want these socks. I should take these shirts. Oh, should I pack my running gear? I probably should. I might want some exercise while I'm there. You're not taking the situation seriously, and now we've got confirmation that he took it even less seriously than we thought before. In the last book, Maxim treated the rescue mission like he was just going down to the pub for a pint. Now, it's like he was treating it as a vacation.
Oh. That's much worse.
So they're closing up on the weekend, and the wedding is happening soon. Maxim's buddy Joe, who was a forgettable element of the trio of friends from the last book, has finally arrived in Albania. Tom has gone to the airport to pick him up, and they've got a surprise. Not only did Joe arrive with Marianne, Maxim's sister, who Maxim assumed wasn't going to make it to the wedding, because she's a medical professional of some sort, but also Caroline has shown up. Remember, that was Maxim's dead brother's wife. So we've got the makings of some drama here. Now, something that happens over the next several scenes is a lot of people go up to Maxim and asks, are you sure that this is what you really want? Because we get a line in a couple of chapters that confirm that it's March, and Maxim's brother died on New Year's Day. So, and that scene is after the wedding. So the entire courtship and marriage between Maxim and Alesia happened in the span of about 2 months. It's not unreasonable for people to ask, are you sure about this? The problem, though, is that we don't get all these people asking him that and confronting him all at once. We have a scene where Joe asks him that, a scene where Caroline asks him that, and a scene where Marianne asks him that. We get the same scene 3 times. And there's not even that much consequential difference between the 3 of them. Maxim is still committed through all of it, despite the common sense that says, maybe date this chick for a couple of months. Because just softballing a guess here, maybe Alesia is utilizing the relationship with Maxim as some sort of unhealthy traumatic coping mechanism. You know, instead of going to therapy. That's not what's going on in the book, but there's a potential headcanon there that should at least be acknowledged. Now, there is a way that you can introduce elements like this and actually still have it engaging. If every time a new character asks the same question, if there is some sort of a differing perspective or a different angle that they see it from, then you would be able to examine this question, should you be marrying this woman, from multiple different perspectives. But the problem is, we've never met Marianne before, so we don't have any real view on who she is. Joe is impressively forgettable, to the point where I had to double check who he was in The Mister to remember who he was. Carolyn actually has some potential for engaging in this front, but Carolyn's scene is after Marianne and Joe's, so by the time we get to her, there's no new ground to really tread. Not the way that James wrote the scenes anyway. And what's worse is that even though everything about this marriage seems foolhardy and rushed, Maxim's able to convince everyone except for Caro that he's really in love and he's going to go through with the wedding.
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Hell, in the scene with Joe, he actually suggests that Maxim be open and honest about what his relationship with Caroline used to be, because I don't think Alesia was fully appraised as to what those two were really doing. Do you think I should tell her? I ask. He shrugs. I have no idea. We've not talked about any of that. Save it for the honeymoon. I laugh a little nervously. Yeah, good idea. Yeah, let's not be fully open and honest with our potential spouse here. Just wait until the paperwork is signed and done with and everything's locked in legally. Honeymoons are a great time to reveal pertinent information. By the way, honey, I have syphilis. There's another scene where Alesia is doing some more prep work for the wedding alongside Marianne and Caroline just kind of antagonizes Alesia a little bit. She's very much opposed to the wedding because she wants Maxim for herself. And she gives this line. I am sorry for your loss, Alesia says quietly. Yes, well, thank you. Caroline swallows and tosses her glossy hair as if shaking off a nasty thought. It will be down to you to host the annual village cricket match next summer, Alesia, among many other events. Alesia stares at her. She knows nothing of cricket. You really don't know what will be expected of you, do you? Caroline states. And this demonstrates how little Alesia understands what she's getting into. Now, James is utilizing this to bolster the idea that Alesia is going to need like finishing school or etiquette classes for later on, and it does lead to something uneventful, but it does lead to something. At the same time, though, it does demonstrate how new to all this Alesia really is and how unprepared she is for the new responsibilities she would have as a countess. Not exactly fair for Alesia. This is something that probably should have been discussed beforehand. The way that he's treating her, Maxim doesn't see Alesia as a wife. He sees her as a mistress to take out of the closet every once in a while when he wants to have some fun. But then the girls go out drinking and Caroline gets a little drunk and reveals some hidden information that Alesia was not aware of beforehand. Not only did she and Maxim take each other's virginity, but the phrase more than friends has been rattling around her brain, tormenting her since Caroline blurted it out earlier. You and he were lovers? She asks. I should say so. We popped each other's cherries. Caroline quirks her lip up as if it's a fond memory. He's a better fuck than my husband. Oh. Alesia is now completely lost for words, as a vision of Caroline wearing nothing but Maxim's shirt and making coffee in his kitchen comes unwelcome to mind. Caroline! Marianne exclaims, shocked. It's true. I know he's your brother. They're both your brothers, she slurs. But you know Maxim's a complete player. She turns her unfocused gaze on Alesia. Darling, he slept with most of London. Her face falls. And after Kit, well, Ow! Enough! Marianne growls, her voice much firmer, and Alesia suspects she's kicked Caroline under the table. Caroline shrugs. It's true. Promiscuous doesn't cover it. He's proof of the adage, practice makes perfect. Hey, you remember that scene in the last book when Maxim and Alesia finally decided to hook up, and he used the words, are you ready? It won't be long. I don't think Maxim is really proof of practice makes perfect when you consider that he taps out after 20 strokes.
8 seconds! That's twice as good as you did in rehearsal.
Maxim and the boys go out to what I assume is supposed to be a bachelor party. They run into Albuquerque there, and he says, I'll be here, Englishman, waiting in her homeland with her family when you fuck up. As if he has the slightest chance of ever getting Alesia back, because, you know, the whole shoving her in a trunk at gunpoint thing is kind of unforgivable. But the way that this scene was written, I thought the story was going to be Alesia, like, getting overwhelmed with everything in England, with a new culture, not being able to deal with her trauma properly, and she might want the simplicity of Albania, so she would, run away at the bottom of the second act or something. No, none of that happens. Maybe it was that I expected too much of James. Maybe I thought this book would actually have some sort of a story. Maybe I thought there was going to be some degree of character that made sense in all of this. Scenes like that gave me a little bit of hope that there was going to be something that fucking happened. Nope! I was just wrong! And the chapter ends with the revelation that Maxim's mother, Rowena, is going to be making an appearance at the wedding as well. Apparently she was invited by Caroline, and Maxim calls her Judas Iscariot for this sacrilege. So Rowena makes an appearance, apparently having flown from New York, dragging along a boy toy named Heath. And Heath has so little characterization that you can pretty much forget about him until like one small moment in like another 200 pages or something. He's effectively a non-entity within this book. And Rowena instantly turns on the charm with lines like this. I'm not here to prevent your wedding, Maxim. That would be a little vulgar, don't you think? But we will talk afterwards, and you will explain to me why you are marrying the help, and why the fuck you haven't invited your grieving mother to this event. Are you ashamed of your bride and her family? Because frankly, that's how this looks. It's no secret that Maxim actually hates his mother. We got reminders of that occasionally in the Mister, and after reading who she is in this book, I don't blame him, honestly. She is a kind of really obnoxious, terrible person. And then they signed the marriage contract, and then they get to the party. And everyone walks up to the newly minted couple and says, congratulations. And we get this bit from Marianne, and it's interesting. Marianne throws her arms around Maxim, and he hugs her. Maxie, she says, and she reaches out a hand to Alesia at the same time. Congratulations, you two. I hope you'll be very happy. She releases Maxim and hugs Alesia. Reformed rakes make the best husbands. As I'm reading this, I assume that what she's going for is she's playing at damage control, considering what Caroline said when she was drunk in the previous scene about Maxim sleeping with half of London, which should not have been news to Alesia, considering the trash bins full of condoms that she's had to clean up. But that's not why the scene is amusing to me. You see, at one point, I posted an image of my notes saying that I'm really not enjoying the story because nothing is happening. Well, inadvertently, one of the notes that I wasn't even focusing on for the joke caught someone's attention, and credit where it's due, but D. Therese on Twitter noted that the reformed rakes make the best husbands line actually came from Bridgerton. Apparently, book 1, chapter 6, so thank you, D. Excellent citation there. Even provided a screenshot, which you see on screen right now. And yeah, I don't know if this is supposed to be an homage or a reference or something. It feels like plagiarism, especially considering that this particular line also features itself prominently on James's website. All I want right now is for Julia Quinn to kick James in the shin. But during all of this and the lead up to it, everyone, like all of Alessia's family, is so terribly interested at who Maxim is, and they want to get to know him. They want to see the ring because it's so European, ignoring the fact that Albania is also European.
I'm extremely famous, and they wanted to meet someone who'd seen toilet paper.
But during the party, we actually get a moment that James almost gets right. You see, one of the more telling things that we'd be able to play around with would be examining a new culture. Albanian customs, Albanian food would be something to really focus on in this scene in order to help breathe life into it and to help demonstrate ways and life of Albanians. It could be a very enlightening moment. And James does sort of include some elements, but not in ways that really set the scene. You see, she sets up moments that are more descriptions rather than any explanation of it. For example, there is apparently a traditional dance that includes all the men. The party is in full swing. Alesia is giddy and a little tipsy from the wine. Maxim has removed his jacket and tie. His hair is tousled from all her female relatives ruffling it, and he looks so handsome. The men have started to dance, and her uncles are trying to persuade Maxim to join them. Valja e kokeset. Come, Chelsea. Her cousin Murkosh goads Maxim. You are Albanian now. Maxim rolls his eyes and turns to Alesia. You didn't mention dancing with a bunch of men?
We work hard. We play hard.
This is the traditional dance from Kooks, Alesia says, grinning at him. He flashes her a smile and gets up to join them.
And would it kill you to smile?
Maybe.
Now, we don't get a description of what the dance really is or any steps. It's just a bunch of men dancing. It's like, okay. I have been told that that is a normal wedding thing that happens, as is people apparently giving money to the groom and shooting guns in the air when the happy couple is heading off to consummate the marriage. We're not told why these traditions are in place. We're just told it's tradition. I'm reminded of Starfire from Teen Titans talking about Tamaran and all of the weird stuff they did there. It reads like that, but far less invested.
On my planet, this is hilarious.
For the actual initial part of the honeymoon, Maxim and Alesia stay at a very nice hotel, someplace called The Plaza in Tirana. And while they're walking into the room, Maxim hands the porter some lek as a tip. Now, this is the only point in the book where the word lek is ever used, but lek is the currency of Albania. And we don't get a specific amount of how much lek Maxim hands over. The problem is the way that it sounds like it's not that much. And that gets even worse when you consider currency exchange. For example, as of July 2023, 91 lek make up $1 and 116 lek make up 1 British pound. Maxim gave a porter in a fancy hotel where they were led into the presidential suite the equivalent of an average person's pocket change.
You're rich, you jerk!
I would understand not wanting to destabilize the local economy or something, but Maxim spends money the way that most people spend oxygen. You'd think you could give him a little bit more than that.
And Nico, you see this? I quit. I opened my own hotel.
And the scene just devolves into Maxim and Alesia enjoying each other's company as newlyweds. And I would like to point out that we are about 106 pages into the story, and there so far has not been even as much as an inciting incident.
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
Now, there's almost something that sounds like something would happen, because Alesia is plagued by something. A thought is nagging her, and she wants to open up and tell Maxim something important, but she can't just yet. She's enjoying the moment too much. She doesn't want to ruin the honeymoon. Well, she does eventually open up on the next page, and it turns out that her period has started, and that's all that's happening. Oh, false alarm! I thought something was happening, but I was wrong! And we do get a very vaguely described sex scene.
I'm shaking with anticipation. It's like an earthquake in a tuna factory down there.
Alesia goes down on Maxim. He lasts maybe 10 seconds. We're not given an actual time frame here, so hey, maybe it could have been as much as 12 seconds. Practiced rake that he is. But the scene progresses, and we get a moment that makes me think that James doesn't actually understand how birth control works. Now, normally, I don't have to worry about that myself beyond condoms. So I decided to consult an expert, specifically my fiancé.
Help! He keeps me in the kitchen!
I let you out of your cage!
Should I just go ahead and start reading while you're doing that?
Hang on.
Hi, Tuck, honey. Hello, buddy. I know. I'm in the wrong seat. I know. I'm not downstairs.
Tuck, you're ruining the shot.
No, I'm not.
No, he's not.
Buddy, can I do the reading? Okay. No? Where are you going? Sorry, confused puppy here. I'm not usually in this seat. Please don't take out your father's laptop. Just sit. Relax. Okay, so we're just going to have a whole blooper reel of just doggy attention. Come here, bud. Ugh. We got to wiggle pup. Okay, you good? Can I read now? No? Okay.
He's finally gone for water.
So, hi, I am Crimson's fiance, future queen of the book throne, which, you know, I helped make really comfy, so I should have had that title anyway, but whatever. We're not splitting hairs or anything like that. Tell him I'm better. So, this next part is very interesting, and when he first read it to me, asking for my input, I read the book later and reiterated how wrong she was. It became one of those things where I was like, wait, does she mean this or does she mean this? Because this book is very confusing in terms of, obviously, she never did any research for this whatsoever.
But she did plenty of research for UK immigration law.
So, for this part, I'm just going to read this little section. I reach over to the bedside for a condom. No, she says, I started the contraceptive pill. What? It's okay. Her eyes sear mine. So pretty much what she's telling him is that on Saturday, their wedding night, that she started birth control on, say, Wednesday or Thursday. So like 3 days before. And that she's fine. No. Absolutely incorrect. As I told Crimson when I was explaining this to him, it would take bare minimum a month for this to even kind of remotely work. It changes different hormone levels, so the fact that it would work within 3 days and make it so that she can magically not have a baby, completely false. Completely incorrect. So obviously James has never even dealt with birth control, researched birth control, figured anything to do with anything about birth control. And she didn't think that people would notice. I threw the book down. So obviously when it came to this one, she didn't do any research on birth control. As you heard Crimson in the background, she did tons of research on immigration law. And with her previous book, 50 Shades of Grey, she did so little research on the BDSM world that she actually ended up putting people in the hospital because of how incorrect her information was with that. She did absolutely nothing in terms of researching the important parts of her book. With 50 Shades of Grey, I actually studied those kinds of relationships in my communications classes, and everything she stated in her book was categorically wrong. With her not doing any of this research with the misses and her portrayal of how birth control works in this story, she could ultimately result in a lot of unwanted pregnancies with this apparent 3-day... He's like a tornado of destruction. Hi. Are you okay?
He's worse than Ash.
Sorry, puppy interruption here.
I got drool on my phone.
Hey, it's your work phone. You don't care about it.
Both of my phones.
So with her lack of research and lack of explanation for what she's doing with birth control, with this magic 3-day working birth control, she's gonna make a lot of people who take it seriously possibly end up with unwanted pregnancies, which is not something you want to have on your record as an author. All right, well, I'm gonna run away downstairs before this crazy train takes out the book throne or a lighting rig. Somebody help me, I have chaotic pets.
Using it.
God, you're an idiot, Tuck. Let's go.
Wait, am I an idiot or is Tuck?
Possibility of both.
Woman?
Love you.
And then, of course, the scene continues. Eventually, they actually get it on, and there's nothing to describe Her fingernails etch her desire on my skin as she gasps and moans close to my ear. She's building and climbing, as am I, and suddenly she's stiffening beneath me as she cries out, her orgasm pushing me over the edge. I cry out as I come, and the world around us fades, and it's only me and my wife, my love. Now, maybe it's good that James is actually backing away from sex scenes and trying to describe darker, more provocative moments in her writing, considering the literal emergency rooms she filled with 50 Shades of Grey. But at the same time, this is really conflicting because she's copied the writing style as far as Maxim being in first person and Alesia being in third person that we got in The Mister. But unlike The Mister, the sex scenes are much more scant and, described much more vaguely. It's almost like she's ashamed of writing erotica, so she's taking the coward's route and backing up a little bit. Look, you write smut. Who cares at this point? You're successful at it. Just embrace what you're doing. Don't back away from it. I would suggest improving first, but that's just me. I'm not shying away from the concept of eroticism at all. I've got books I can't even show on camera. But this absolute weak sauce of a scene is so deflating. This was the one thing I thought the book had going for it. There was too much build-up. We've been waiting too long for a sex scene, but I thought it was going to be something, and I was somehow disappointed. If we don't have the eroticism of the original book, why does this story exist? I mean, aside from shamelessly monetizing name recognition at this point, this is the only thing that James has going for her. She was famous at one point for a subpar book that miraculously sold a bunch of copies, and now she's just cruising on Easy Street. Let that be an indicator that being on the New York Times best-selling list is not a mark of quality. Something else to consider is the word choice that James uses in this brief scene. She uses a lot of verbs as double entendres: building, climbing, stiffening, things like that. For the few of you out there who do want to write a more erotic story than this, something to keep in mind is you want to go with sensory words. I mean, you can use double entendres like that well enough, but you also, to really get the audience's attention, you want to engage the senses. And this is a good writing tip in general, but especially it's important for erotica. You'll want to describe sights, smells, occasionally tastes, definitely touch. If you set it up well and you use the right senses, preferably in ways that don't sound too terribly cliche, you'll be able to create a visceral feedback for the reader, something that they can really relate to, because that is an image they can picture, a smell they can remember, things like that. James is absolutely doing the bare minimum for this scene, and it makes her book all the worse.
But enough about hypothetical erections.
But in the next chapter, the honeymoon begins properly as Maxim and Alesia arrive at they are in the Caribbean in Endeavor Bay. And the sunlight and the wonderful weather and being married must really do it for Alesia, because at one point they're hanging out in the ocean when we come up for air, I'm aroused and ready for her. Shall we fuck in the sea? I whisper breathlessly, half in jest. There's no one here. Maxim! Alesia is scandalized, but she scans the shoreline, where there are a couple of villas, but there's no one in sight on the beach or in the sea. She gives me a coy smile, kisses me again, and grinds against me. Then, reaching into my trunks, she grabs my more than ready dick. Fuck, we're doing this. Nothing says an enticing sex scene like risking a UTI. By now it's become really apparent that this book doesn't really exist to tell a story or examine themes or play around with characters or ideas. Really, this is just an extension of what The Mister was. This is James showing off an appreciation for rich people stuff.
So pleased and gracious to welcome you to our sophisticated society.
We don't get an exploration or examination for the music, that Alesia plays, we don't get any real description of the hotels that they stay in. We get a list of like some fancy places, like the beachfront villa that they're staying in, turquoise waters, but that's about it. No physical description of what that place looks like. Apparently it was designed by Oliver Messel. I've never heard of him before, but okay. This book is not a story. This is a list of James's favorite things.
Credit card statements and IRS letters, waking before the alarm clock goes off. These are the things that always piss me off.
But the honeymoon isn't all champagne and sex. Alesia brings up a concern to Maxim, something that happened on the day of their wedding. I tense, wondering what Marianne has blurted to my dear, dear Alesia. She said, reformed rakes make the best husbands. Alessia's dark eyes glimmer, full of questions in the soft light. I blow out a breath, trying to think what to say. I have read Georgette Heyer. I know what a rake is, she adds. Now, I don't know anything about Georgette Heyer, so I'm just going to take this particular line at face value, but James directly lifted a quote from Julia Quinn. Why isn't she giving due credit? It's on page 117 of this book. You know, for all the dated references we got, I'm starting to think that E.L. James was like Frozen a la Austin Powers, but without the talent or charisma. Now, I've complained before about scenes where the characters could resolve their problems if they just talk like adults for 30 seconds. And to James's credit, that's what's going on here. But it turns out the inverse of my complaint is almost as bad, because while Maxim does try to give a little bit of an explanation, this serves as a solution for this scene. And while there are complaints about him being a fuckboy later on in the book, this is a pattern that James utilizes frequently, where these two, Maxim and Alesia, will bump heads and they'll have a conversation and actually sit down to talk, and that is a wonderful thing to do in real life. For stories, not so much. Turns out it's actually really dull. These misconceptions, these erroneous thoughts are resolved sometimes within a page or two of the problems being raised. And while that is a good sign of a healthy relationship, it doesn't lead to any additional drama. It doesn't lead to any fulfilling consequences. Oftentimes the scenes don't lead to anything. I'm at a loss at this one. This is, how do you have healthy communication like this? And I'm complaining about it. Just, oh my God, something happened, please. Look, you want an example of this exact thing done right? BoJack Horseman handled this frequently and oftentimes very well. There's the scene where BoJack goes to meet his old buddy Herb, who is dealing with cancer, and he goes to apologize. There's a long-running history they have, and BoJack didn't stand up for him. And so he goes back like 20 years later to say hi, and ultimately apologizes, and Herb doesn't forgive him.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I don't forgive you.
Herb, I said I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I do not forgive you.
You have to live with the shitty thing you did for the rest of your life. You have to know that it's never, ever going to be okay.
I really think that we'd both feel better if we
I'm dying. I'm not going to feel better, and I'm not going to be your prop, so you can feel better.
That particular scene was when I realized how good a show BoJack Horseman was going to be, because you had all of these setups for these feel-good moments, and it would, like, in an unexpected twist, it would reverse it, and it's like, no, we're not going to have the fairy tale ending. You actually have to deal with consequences. You did something bad, now you gotta live with it.
But what I needed then was a friend. And you abandoned me. And I will never forgive you for that. Now get the fuck out of my house.
But then finally, at page 128, they touch down at Heathrow, and the happy couple has finally arrived at jolly old England. It's a strange, mystical land shrouded in mystery.
I've just been bested by superior American ingenuity.
Scholars have studied the land of Angles, and we do not fully understand their ways and customs yet, like why they eat beans on toast and think it's normal.
Hello, darling! Say, do you know where the Taj Mahal is?
But as Americans are famous for our cultural sensitivity, I shall just say that we respect England and their weird backwards ways.
And now, global politics in 30 seconds.
Alright, so Maxim and Alesia get back to their apartment. All their friends are there waiting for them, including Henrietta, who I don't think met in the last book, but it's Tom's girlfriend. And more stuff, and that's the chapter. Okay, so that's not actually the full chapter. There is one small thing here, because Alesia remembers something. When she was escaping the traffickers, she also escaped with a friend, whose name I am probably going to butcher, Blariana. And this is something that, oh boy, the solution to that scene is so disappointing, but it becomes something of a mission for Alesia to try to resolve on her own. Maxim's about to get his own semi-plot to follow through the rest of the book. This one's Alesia's, but we just get an introduction, and that's it for now. Moving on, we're on chapter 11 already, page 145. Can you see how fast we're going through this book? Does that give you an idea of how little substance is in here? Maxim goes for a jog in the morning and starts thinking about his legacy and what the next step of marriage is going to be, and of course his thoughts come down to kids. But this particular line reads like a typo. Maybe we should make babies, an heir and a spare. A little boy like Alesia? A little girl like Alesia? Did someone miss this in proofreading? A little boy like Alesia? So it's actually funny because there's another note that I have on page 52 that Alesia is complaining, that she's not what her father wanted her to be because, after all, she's not a boy. I just find it funny that James would write that line and then make this mistake right here. While he's gone, Alesia wakes up, sees that he's gone for a run, and decides to start moving things around, really give the apartment a much-needed feminine touch. But when Maxim returns as she's unpacking her case in the spare bedroom. Grinning because he's finally home, she stops to listen as he walks into his bedroom. And then she hears him jog up the hall with some urgency to check the kitchen, then the living room. "Alesia!" he calls, panic evident in his voice. "Oh, Zod, no. Maxim, I'm here." She steps out of the spare room and stares at him standing at the end of the hallway. His shoulders drop in relief, and he runs a hand through his damp hair. "Don't do that to me! I thought you were gone!"
All unfit citizens of Lemongrab must be reconditioned!
Does Maxim not realize that Alesia is a woman unto her own, something that he stated beforehand? Does he have a problem with object permanence? Once she's out of sight, she might not exist anymore? I know he's responding to the past kidnapping scenes and the like, because the last time this happened, Anatoli had kidnapped her and fled to Albania, but there's no apparent impetus in this scene. He just walks in and all of a sudden is terrified. Is she supposed to greet him kneeling at the door, half dressed or something? Like, he didn't even call out for her initially. Just to walk in and say, "Honey, I'm home," is just goes in, checks the bedroom, she's not there, checks the kitchen, she's not there. Very indicative two places to start looking, by the way. And then he starts panicking. And they have another conversation where he says he's angry at himself for overreacting, and she should have said that she was in the spare room or something, and he was anxious, and they kiss and make up. And again, it's good that they're having these conversations, except there's no consequence in the story, and I am so bored. In the following scene, Maxim introduces the idea of what life will be like once Alesia is fully inducted as a countess. I do not know what I would do if I didn't cook and clean for you, she adds as she takes a bite of bubble bread and butter. I'm sure you'll be busy once we've established you as a countess. Alesia's eyes widen. What does that mean? Staff to manage, houses to run, functions to organize and attend. She gasps, her dark eyes stricken with alarm. Sorry, I shrug. It comes with the territory. Don't look so worried, you'll be fine. I think I need lessons, she exclaims. Lessons? And my mother's contemptuous offer of finishing school pops unwelcome into my mind. And this becomes another very minor plot thread in Alesia's storyline, where she will eventually join a finishing school, or an etiquette school rather. They drive out to the country to one of their estates out that way and start bumbling around and nothing happens. But the display of wealth makes Alesia realize she has so much when others do not. And you would think that this could be the start of something. A bit of character examination, a bit of her trying to do some public good, maybe give back to the less fortunate or something. Nope, this is just a cursory observation, and then she just goes back to being rich. There are so many examples of small things like that, small pointed lines that feel like they should be building to something, and they just don't. There are so many plot threads that just are introduced and immediately flat tire and die. Eventually, Maxim has to go back to work, and that really just entails him bumbling around in Kit's old office and looking at some of his old notes. And that's when Caroline walks in and actually brings some information to Maxim's attention. She pulls a couple of letters out of her handbag and places them in front of Maxim. I glance down at them, then back at her, cocking my head. What are these? I think you should read them. The haunted look in her eyes sends a frisson down my spine, and I grasp both letters and scan them. Every hair on my body stands to attention. Genetic. What? My mouth dries as I look at her. Why would Kit be referred for genetic counseling? And believe it or not, this is Maxim's plot thread to deal with throughout the rest of the book. So apparently his older brother went in for some sort of test. More on that later, sort of. But combine this with his thoughts of starting a family with Alesia, and Maxim grows very concerned, because if Kit had some condition, it's entirely possible that Maxim would have some condition and could possibly pass them on to kids. This would have dire potential consequences for him. And unfortunately, a lot of Kit's old stuff is missing. His laptop, his phone, his journal, all apparently gone from his office, and Caroline doesn't know where they are either, so they're not at her place. But Maxim has no lead, so he's going to follow up separately. He knows who the family doctor who saw Kit was, someone named Dr. Renton, so he's going to make an appointment and try to inquire to see what was wrong with Kit. So he goes back home, but before he arrives, we get a line that gave me a genuine laugh. Credit to James for this one, it's good. As I round the corner of Tite Street under the embankment, I spy a few people, mainly men, hanging around the entrance to my building. Wait, these are not people. 3 of the shambolic riffraff are holding cameras. Paparazzi! I just love the implication that paparazzi aren't really people.
This one's called Stop Taking Pictures Outside My House or I'm Calling the Cops.
They're interested in the whole Maxim got married abroad, who's this new woman in his life thing, because he, despite being an earl, hasn't actually really made any proclamations or announcements. By and large, the whole of England doesn't know who Alesia is or anything about her. Maxim's able to slip by them easily enough and goes upstairs where Alesia is playing Clair de Lune on the piano. A lovely piece, but like so many other times James does this, we don't understand why Alesia would feel any connection to this song. It's a wonderful opportunity to explore her emotional connection to music, and James instead chooses as an opportunity to just list something fancy. An otherwise wonderful piece is reduced to just something kinda neat. But there is some business they need to attend to. You see, apparently a foreign wedding certificate doesn't really count as valid in UK immigration, or at least that's how the book portrays it. So they need to go to an immigration lawyer and try to get everything sorted out to make sure that Alesia is able to legally stay in England. And wouldn't you know it, I think it's some kind of counsel, I don't know exactly what she is, but the lawyer they meet there is named Letitia Kavanaugh, and wouldn't you know it, Maxim slept with her too. That little nugget of information will amount to nothing. But Letitia does point out that Maxim's original plan of do the one wedding in Albania, then come back and do a real wedding in the UK won't work, because if he marries again without dissolving the previous marriage, the second marriage won't be legally recognized. The lawyer gives them some advice, saying that Alesia just needs to apply for a family visa and then she should be fine. And yeah, effectively that entire problem is resolved. Aren't you glad that James did such extensive research on UK immigration law in order to provide that scene? You know, when Michael Crichton does research for things, he'll give you like 3 pages of a bibliography in the end of a novel, and then actually utilizes that information effectively in the story. So they leave the lawyers, and Maxim is given an article, like Joe forwards him an article regarding him entering his building or something, probably from the paparazzi earlier, and he asks, "Since when did I become so interesting?"
Making a lot of assumptions right now.
Well, one, he's unfortunately not very interesting. He's just this weird 2-dimensional character that we're supposed to find attractive. And 2, he's like an earl or something. So shouldn't he already be used to some degree of attention from the press? It should at least be something he's braced for. Although we don't really get a good gauge of who he is in British society. Right now he's really just some rich guy with loose connections to British aristocracy. Once they near home, Alesia brings up a concern that Maxim will get bored with her, and this goes back to the whole reformed rakes thing with Caroline. Maxim, 1 page later, just convinces her that it's all okay because he loves her, and that should be good enough, and it is. But when they get home, they notice there's more paparazzi waiting outside their building. Obviously, Maxim wants Alesia to have some degree of privacy from the paparazzi, so he comes up with a cunning plan. And cunning plan is capitalized, and I don't know why. So, British viewers, if that's a pun I just don't understand, please let me know. It feels like it's supposed to be a pun. Maybe it's the name of a sitcom or something. But yeah, his cunning plan, I would have thought it would be like come in through a servant's entrance or something, but it's actually Alesia goes in first, and then he goes into the building after that by himself.
Are you being intentionally dense?
Huh? Once they're inside, Maxim brings up the idea of looking at musical colleges for Alesia, because another way that she could stay in England is through a student visa. I don't know why they're going this route, but okay. Maybe it's easier. But Alesia doesn't want to look at musical colleges. She wants to go to bed with Maxim. And we get another soft-core introduction to a sex scene, including this great line from Maxim. "Your panties are wet, sweet Alesia. I like that a lot." There's also this one particular moment where she takes off her bra and he's rubbing his face along her chest. Desire courses through her veins, and she turns dark eyes to blazing green as he strokes his chin across the sensitive bud. "Ah, sure you don't want me to shave?" he teases, and he does it again, his eyes never leaving hers. You're gonna get rug burn doing that. Maxim's smile is cautious. "Good. Look, I can span an Alesia. You're an octave." And already we're almost halfway through the book. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how I managed to get through this. Some time goes by and Maxim goes to see Dr. Renton, the family doctor that apparently was helping Kit with whatever this genetic counseling business is all about. And I admit I don't know too much about the British medical system, but this kind of perplexes me. My brother, genetic counseling, what do you know? Ah, his bushy gray eyebrows shoot up his forehead. He's taken aback. He leans forward in his chair and his eyebrows make it the return journey as he frowns. Wow. Propping his elbows on his desk, he rests his chin on his hands. I can't help you, my lord. What? Your brother, for whatever reason, has decided not to impart information to you, and as his doctor, I cannot breach his privacy. I have a duty of care to him. My mouth falls open in disbelief. Feeling winded, I watch dumbfounded as he folds his hands in his lap and sits patiently waiting for me to say something. Your response is unacceptable. My brother is no longer with us. I am sorry, Maxim. There's nothing I can do. As part of his genetic counseling, prior to being tested, your brother will have discussed the implications and whether or not to tell his immediate relatives. But surely my hands are tied. Maxim is like in his upper 20s. Is this scene supposed to be solidifying the idea that he doesn't know what doctor-patient confidentiality is? Or is that just not a thing in Britain? And this is a really big deal. Maxim doesn't know what Kit's story was, or if he killed himself as a result of his diagnosis, or if maybe he died because of his diagnosis. There's a possibility that this genetic whatever it is led to something like maybe he had a seizure because he died while he was riding his motorcycle in icy conditions. Maybe he slipped because of something happening, and that was a causal factor. That's something that Maxim feels he should be aware of. The smart thing would probably be to get tested yourself, because whether or not Kit actually had the condition is kind of immaterial. Maxim should probably get himself checked out. Does he do that? No! I don't know why. It's not like he can't afford it. Instead, he goes to his mother and insists on talking to her about this to find out what happened to Kit. When you have to suspend common sense for your story to work, for your plot thread to trudge along, something that you would assume would be relatively simple to fix, you don't have a good story. Maxim even calls Dr. Renton a tight-lipped old bastard. Honestly, the doctor sounds professional. He's actually, doing what he's supposed to within the confines of his job. Also, there's something up with Rowena. Apparently, she's spending more than double what her allowance is supposed to be. Like, she gets some dividend or something from the Trevithick estate, and she's spending a lot more money than she's supposed to, and now that Maxim's the head of that estate, he's got to find out what's going on. And of course, Rowena refuses to answer her phone or actually confront Maxim at all. She's really a terrible person. In terms of character and drama, it's perfectly workable. You can make that, she doesn't have to be a good person. But that also means that if you try to have any kind of a redemption arc later on, you're going to have to do a lot more work. Voldemort, as an example, would be very difficult to try to justify later on and make him look sympathetic. I mean, good luck doing that with Magic Hitler.
Chief McNichol speaking.
Is this the police?
Yeah, this is the police.
Fuck you!
There's a quick scene where Maxim and Alesia are talk about moving, and it's largely nothing throughout the rest of the book. It's a thing that happens, and near the end, they move. But at the end of that conversation, Maxim's mother finally calls back, and we get this brilliant exchange. Maxim, your messages are insufferably rude! Why would I want to talk to you? And what the fuck do you mean you've cut me off? Swearing now, my mother is in a snit. Exactly what I said. I rang you days ago, and you've not replied. That's insufferably rude. Once you've learned to be a little more gracious when leaving messages, you'll receive a quicker response. You'll catch more flies with honey than vinegar, Maxim. Surely a man of your appetites understands that. She's absolutely insufferable and an utter hypocrite. She talks about being rude and that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, but starts swearing at her kid, saying, "Why would I want to talk to you?" And then Maxim presses Rowena for more information about Kit's condition with the whole genetic counseling thing. and, almost begs for information, but Rowena just refuses to give him anything, saying it has nothing to do with you, just forget it, which of course doesn't answer anything, and Maxim presses for more information. Rowena says forget about it and then just hangs up. Here's a fun challenge for anybody. Find me a single redeemable quality about Rowena by the end of the book. I mean, you could even find redeemable qualities about Maxim. He was sloppy and slow and irresponsible in his response to go rescue Alesia from Albania, but at least he went there. To distract himself from the phone call with his mother and everything to do with Kit, Maxim decides to take Alesia shopping so that she can have some proper clothes for when she starts taking classes. Alesia needs clothes fit for a countess, not a student. Let's go shopping. You need clothes. Proper clothes. Alesia gapes at him. Yeah, let's do that. I check the time. Harvey Nicks should be open for another couple of hours. But, I don't know where we would start. There's a personal shopping service. We'll start there. All of this senseless name dropping really gets to me in this book. I don't know what Harvey Nicks is. I don't like having to research things like that when context clues don't give me a sense of scale. Like, I'm assuming it's some upper echelon thing, but a name drop itself doesn't actually inform you of anything. Moments like this feel like James is having a how do you do fellow kids but for rich people. Then they go shopping, then there's more stuff. After shopping, Maxim and Alesia go drinking, and we get a line that doesn't sound like it would be significant, and I mean really it's not, but James tries to build on it. In Japan there is sake, in Albania, raki. What do the English have? Gin, I suppose. There are many new distilleries popping up to quench the nation's thirst for English gin. And because of that, Maxim eventually gets the idea that he should open a distillery. And that's about it. But as they're staggering home, both drunk, Alesia starts worrying about all the women that Maxim has slept with. Not to the point where the man should probably get tested just in case. But it does lead to this perplexing character moment, and I don't know why this is like this. Maxim sits Alesia on the edge of the bed. Let's get you undressed. He sinks to his knees and removes her boots. Alesia reaches out, running her fingers through his hair. So soft, she whispers. Maxim removes her socks, then stands up and wrestles her out of her jacket. The photograph's in here, Alesia says, and sways as she turns towards the nudes. You know these women? Yes. He tosses her jacket on the sofa. In the, biblical sense? Fuck. Maxim grips her chin, forcing her gaze on him. She squints so that he's in focus. Alesia, you've got to let this go. For your sanity and mine. I'll take these photos down. It was so thoughtless of me to leave them here. I'll do it tomorrow. He's got nude photos of women he slept with, decorating what I'm assuming is his bedroom. A bedroom that I believe they've been in before. Like, I'm gonna be perfectly honest, this scene is not set well, so I think they're back in Maxim's apartment. This is somewhere they've been before, and the married man has decided to leave up nudes of other women all over the place. On the walls, at least. We're talking real sleazeball stuff here. I mean, granted, the whole "are you gonna get bored of me" thing is not an unfounded concern, considering that he is a slut who's been handled more than your average doorknob. Now, it's revealed on a following page that Maxim himself took the photos. Apparently, they were some of his best work. But it's stuff like that that contributes to Alessia's stress about marriage with him. As she stated before, are you going to get bored with me and move on to someone else? This is someone who has banged, by his own admission, maybe more than 100 women. And despite the fact that this is really not that deep of a concept, and the fact that she has spelled it out for him beforehand, Maxim doesn't understand what her problem is. It's you, dude. You're bothering her. You're fucking.
Certainly illustrates the diversity of the word.
I sigh. Carolyn spilling the beans didn't help. I understand why Alesia is sensitive about her. By revealing our sexual past, Caro sealed doubt in Alesia's mind about my fidelity, and then we met Letitia, which only worsened matters. I rub my face, trying to forget that awkward moment. Alesia has been confronted with my sexual antics since she's known me. I blow out a breath, and a thought occurs to me. Maybe it's our cultural differences that she's finding difficult. One aspect I observed of life in Kooks was the casual segregation of men and women. Maybe that's it. Maybe she doesn't understand that here people can fuck and be friends. Why so many lovers? It's a good question, and I think this is the answer. Sex, here, is a recreational activity for many, including me. It still is, but it's so much more satisfying with my wife. Why is that? Love? Yes, love. Avoiding intimacy has been a way of life for me, and it was never an issue until I found Alesia and fell in love. There, that's it. And she doesn't understand. I grin, relieved. I think I've cracked the code to her anxiety. You are a fuckboy! Stop it! So Maxim is not very introspective, not very clever when it comes to critical thinking, doesn't listen very well when his wife tells him something pretty clearly, and I would say that this is a good consequence of Maxim's past coming back to haunt him, because, you know, he was a raving slut back in the day being like 2 months ago, and now the woman he's married to has a problem with that. But the problem is these consequences are all resolved within a page or two of him just saying, oh, but honey, I love you. And then she just accepts that and they go back to cuddling or something. And you would think with the repetition of this exact problem coming up every other chapter or so, that it would escalate. Like, it starts at this level, and then it builds, and then it builds, and then it builds, and eventually you reach a breaking point where Alesia is like, I'm so conflicted by all this, I've got to go away for a weekend and clear my head or something, but we never get to that point. This is drama on easy mode. It's not satisfying because there's like nothing happening. It's the next morning. Maxim wakes up at about 9:30, which is weird because in the previous chapter he said that he had meetings in the morning. So how seriously can he take his job when he can sleep in that much on a work day? You know, it would actually be nice to see him take a slight ounce of responsibility anywhere in his life. Something I forgot to mention because it was a blip in a mess of scenes that I'm not interested at all. But a couple chapters ago, Alesia went to Letitia to try to get some information regarding Bluriana and how to possibly track her down. Well, Letitia suggested that Alesia just hire a private investigator to try to uncover something, but Maxim doesn't like this idea. Alesia tries to explain that Bluriana is only 17 and, you know, could really use the help, but Maxim says that no, he is going to forbid her from getting involved in this. But he will talk to Tom, whose company does investigative work as well, and Tom will put out some feelers and see if he can find anything. And this seems to satisfy Alesia for now. Except Alesia already made an appointment with the Maddox Peacock private investigators, and she goes to this guy for two things. One, she's looking for Bluriana, of course, and the other thing is she wants to trace a family member. The brother of Virginia Strickland, and good on you if you remember who that was. Virginia Strickland was Alesia's grandmother who lived in England. She was the one, I believe, who sent Alesia the Harry Potter books through which she somehow learned English. Maxim and Alesia fill out 4 applications to different music conservatories, and it's late, but not too late, and Maxim has an idea on something they can do, and it's actually not sex. We're going to watch TV? Alesia is surprised. They've never watched television together, even in Kooks. The large flat screen pops to life with an electronic hiss of static, but instead of a TV program, there's a strange white logo on a black background. Here, Maxim hands her a game console controller. She frowns up at him. Call of Duty, he prompts. And this scene devolves into a vibrant display of how little research James has done for Call of Duty and gaming in general. He kisses her quickly and sits up. Your English is getting so much better. No, I fancy playing a game that I know I can win. It's what my ego needs right now. Alesia laughs and sits up beside him. How do you know you can beat me? I didn't see a PS4 in Kooks. and you're holding the console upside down. Here, I'll teach you. She's holding the entire console in her hand. The console's not the controller, James. What you're describing is she's holding the PlayStation entirely. And how would you even get confused on how to hold a PS4 controller upside down in the first place? They're very ergonomic.
This is PS4.
And it gets worse because this does lead into a sex scene of a sort, just like lots of sexual teasing and the like. And the other problem is I'm not sure about this setup because it's described that they're playing competitively. Like at the end of the chapter, Maxim has said, I got to beat you at Call of Duty. I mean, we don't know which one. Are they playing Cold War, Vanguard, Black Ops? But they're playing competitively. Okay, I can deal with that. But they're playing one at a time. Alesia is the only one who's actually playing, while Maxim is just going around suckling all over on her. Are they just playing zombies and comparing score or something? But the worst element is Maxim comes up with the doing your duty gag as an entendre for sex. And James repeats that joke like 8 times between 3 pages. Call of Duty, he prompts. She smirks. I thought that's what we always do. Maxim laughs. Duty? Duty, Lady Trevithick? She giggles. Well, duty and pleasure. So how's doing your duty going so far? Oh, my thirsty girl, doing her duty. Holding her fast as we both return to the present. Duty done. Duty done, baby. Alesia blows out a breath and gives me a sleepy smile. You have also fulfilled your duty.
You and this conversation have gone way past annoying and into the land of I might have to kill you if you don't shut up.
James came up with one joke that was tired 20 years ago and thought it was brilliant. I swear, E.L. James is so out of touch. She just writes about things that she thinks sound good without actually understanding them, like that one rapping pastor meme.
My crew is big and it keeps getting bigger. That's because Jesus Christ is my name.
No! Alessia's gonna have to audition to make it into one of the music colleges in London, and she decides to practice Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata third movement. And we get some small scenes. Oliver, who's like Maxim's business manager or something, shows up to discuss some business. Maxim reaches out to Rowena for, asking her to be an actual mother for a change. On the happier side of things, it turns out that Alessia's PI was able to get some work done. Finding Virginia Strickland's remaining relative was relatively easy. He's a man named Tobias Andrew Strickland, and we've got some basic info about him, including where he lives. It turns out that it's somewhere in Surrey, so not terribly far from Alesia. Also, British addresses are weird. What is that supposed to be, like a zip code or something? Maxim gets a call from someone named Donovan Green, who is a journalist for Weekend News. He inquires about Alesia, asking if it's true, if Lord Trevithick married his cleaner, and you would think that that plot point would possibly go somewhere. It doesn't. In an attempt to make amends, Caroline shows up and asks to take Alesia shopping. And that's what they do. They go shopping. I cannot believe that this book is so devoid of content that I am highlighting an otherwise random shopping spree as a plot point. Maxim gets invited to some party hosted by some Russian oligarch guy. And of course, Alesia is going to join him. Also, rumor has it that his father is ex-KGB, so great timing with the book's publication considering world events and all. I'm obviously not blaming James for that, it's just funny. Now, you would think that something like this might lead to something consequential. Obviously, by this point, you've learned the pattern and you know that this will lead to effectively nothing. Alesia and Maxim go to Trevelyan House, just one of the properties that Maxim owns, where they meet Blake, who's like a butler or a valet or something. We're not sure what. I don't think his job title is ever listed. Another reminder that Rowena knows something about Kit. Alesia, Maxim, and Caro all show up at the party of the house belonging to Dmitry Igonov. They also meet Henrietta there, also known as Henry, Tom's girlfriend, and Henry suggests that she and Alesia just go exploring around the party. And at one point, Alesia runs into Arabella Watts, who is apparently one of Maxim's exes, so Alesia starts worrying again about Maxim's past as a fuckboy. But then she starts playing on the piano, and she actually garners some degree of attention from some of the people around, including the brother of the host, Grisha Igonov. Grisha is rumored to be a bit more dangerous than his brother, possibly dipping his hand into more illicit businesses, shall we say. The fact that there is, in fact, an orgy in the basement of this house, which is, as Maxim says at one point, likely being recorded for blackmail purposes, should tell you enough. But Alesia stops playing, looks up, and she sees Maxim kissing another woman. And this event right here is probably the most consequential anything that actually happens in the book. It is the single moment of drama that takes the longest to resolve. And it's resolved by the end of the next chapter. Correction, it's fixed in 2 chapters. The woman in question is apparently named Charlotte, who is another one of Maxim's past flings. There are a lot of women that Maxim has slept with at this party. His dick has been in that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. But Charlotte is drunk and desperate, which is why she went to Maxim. He, of course, rebuffs her and says, I can't do anything with you, I'm married, and you're wasted. But Alesia doesn't see that part, of course. It is that standard cliche that, wow, I thought James was more creative than this, but I guess she's out of cards to play. Of course, Alesia doesn't see Charlotte being rebuffed, so she says she's got to get out of there, and Grisha, with his shady connections, offers to help her out. Now, you might be thinking, okay, he's probably connected to something illicit. He might take her somewhere very bad. Something dangerous might happen. After all, she's got a history of being kidnapped, so there could be some repetition there. James seems dependent on repetition. Instead, Maxim starts searching around trying to find Alesia, and he runs into Grisha. And Grisha says that he just had her sent home. And that's actually what ends up happening. We've got all this set up for something potentially disastrous, and it's like, it's nothing. Like, why? I mean, I don't want something bad to happen, but I want something bad to happen. So Alesia arrives home safely and completely untouched. Good. But then she gets up to the new place she's living, and Rowena is waiting there in the living room.
Hey, Billy, come back! Your mom's here!
And despite Alesia trying to be polite to Rowena, Rowena just continues being insufferable. Alesia finds her voice. Hello, Rowena. May I help you? If you're looking for Maxim, he's out. Maxim's mother folds her arms, remaining in the doorway, unmoving, unwavering, unwelcoming, hostile. Oh, Zot. You look very nice, dear, but you'll never make a countess. There's a saying that we have in this country. You can't make a silk purse from a sow's ear. How much money do you want to walk out of my son's life?
No deal. Lois may be worth $1 million to you, but to me, she's worthless.
And she claims that her boy toy, Heath, has done some investigation, and he claims that the marriage isn't legitimate somehow, and it can be easily annulled, so she tries to use that as a threat. And Rowena just keeps on going off, saying that Maxim only married Alesia to spite her, and it won't be long until he strays, and Alessia's having none of it. I want nothing from you, Alesia whispers, her heart beating a frantic tattoo. And maybe, if you'd been a better mother, your son might have a better respect for women and chosen someone with all the qualities you wish for in a daughter-in-law. But maybe, because you are his mother, he didn't. He chose me, and I am glad to say I am nothing like you. Rowena gasps, shocked. Alesia walks to the door. I think it's time you left. Okay, seriously, Alesia deserves to be in a better book than this. But just as Alesia is done telling Rowena to fuck off, Maxim shows up. And we get some back and forth as this turns into a pissing contest. Marianne shows up at some point too, and Rowena says, in answer to your message, you have nothing to worry about regarding Kit's genetic counseling thing. Neither he or Marianne have anything to worry about, nothing. And Maxim is, at this point, begging Rowena for actual clarification and to stop being so difficult with all of this. But Marianne has actually figured out the truth. Mama, please, I just got married. We want children. Her lips thin. You figure it out. I repeat, it's nothing to do with you or Marianne. I frown as I fail to make any connection with what she's saying and what could possibly have been wrong with Kit, and why that has nothing to do with me or my sister. Oh, for fuck's sake, you're so obtuse, Maxie, Marianne explodes. What? Daddy was not Kit's father! Each word is a staccato expletive from Marianne's mouth. So Marianne confirms that it was Kit's biological father who had the genetic issue, and Rowena says that he died last year from his condition. And that's pretty much the end of it. We never even learned what the genetic condition was. It's part of the reason I had to keep saying genetic counseling, because we never learn in the end what the hell was wrong with Kit. Was it a factor in his crash? Did Kit intentionally end himself? I don't know! I don't think anyone who's read this knows. So Rowena concludes the visit by telling Maxim that her boy toy Heath has done some research and claims that Maxim and Alesia's marriage is illegitimate, despite the fact that, like 100 pages ago, Maxim's lawyer said that it was. So I don't know who to believe at this point. So Maxim kicks everybody out except for Alesia, of course, and the two of them just start talking. Alesia says that she saw the kiss and that Grisha just helped her get home. Maxim explains what was going on, and that the girl who kissed him was just some drunk ex or whatever, and that it means nothing. This is, what, the third or fourth time that Maxim's infidelity has come up as a non-plot point? But all is forgiven, and they go to bed. The next morning, Alesia is recounting the confrontation between Maxim and his mother, and going over everything. It was a very turbulent day for her, of course. And she realizes that Maxim is, in fact, a very good man for her, for this one simple reason. He's explained the kiss. He can't help how women react to him. He's probably had to contend with that kind of attention since he was in his teens. And what hot-blooded male wouldn't take advantage? He only changed when he met Alesia. She saw the proof, or lack, in the wastebasket in his bedroom. No one since I saw you clutching the broom in my hallway. I've only felt it since I met you. Her ire dissipates, leaving a burning hole in her chest. He didn't have to marry her. He could have left. He stood up to his mother on her behalf, and that's not something an Albanian man would generally do. Okay, so fuck Albania, I guess. Oh, it's a lovely country. About half the population is garbage, but it's a lovely country. And meanwhile, Maxim is lamenting himself because Alesia leaving the party early was such a blow that, like, it instantly brought back images of her being kidnapped from the last book. I remember when the arsehole spirited her away and how devastating that was. Yeah, so devastating that he didn't charter a private jet, he didn't leave immediately, he stopped to pick up an engagement ring, and to make sure that he packed his running gear before he left, and then when he got there, just kind of casually strolled around and stayed to have beer in a hotel or something, because he's going to meet his future in-laws in a little bit. Maybe a little bit of liquid courage will help. I'm not saying he didn't care, but saying he was devastated feels like gaslighting. Let's get more stuff. Nothing's happening. Maxim and Rowena have another conversation. It builds to another tepid sex scene. James continues using innuendo verbs instead of trying to engage with the reader's senses, so this all runs flat. And Alesia threatens Maxim, saying that if he ever kisses anyone else, she will castrate him. Alesia is far and away the best character in this series. It's not even an opinion. And to convince Alesia that he will always be loyal to her, Maxim comes up with an idea and says, let's have a baby. That's a great lesson. Hey, is your relationship a little bit rocky? You need something to straighten it all out and give you some stability? Have a kid or two. That'll make everything so much easier. Plot threads in this book aren't resolved so much as discarded in exchange for something else. It's like James just got bored with what she was writing, so she moved on to something new as quickly as possible. Look at all the pages I can just skip because nothing happens. On Monday, Alesia starts an etiquette class where she's not allowed to use her last name, I guess for anonymity's sake of the clients. And this is an element that I've brought up before, but I've got a particular rant here. Alesia checks in, sits down, and gets an introduction from the instructor. Alesia is paying attention to Jennifer Knight, their social etiquette instructor and the owner of the school. And our mission is to empower all of you to present your best selves. You'll have the confidence to walk into any room and know exactly how to behave. From the boardroom to the banqueting hall, you'll be equipped to handle any work and social situation. We'll start with the basics, introductions, both formal and informal, what forms of address you should use, and while mainly focusing on British etiquette, we'll touch on cultural differences that you should be aware of to make those you meet and greet feel respected and comfortable in your presence. Jennifer gives the class a broad smile. If you'll turn to the first page of your workbook, we can begin. And in a complimenting scene, we get a little bit of Maxim discussing things with Oliver and Caroline as they discuss basic whatevers about starting like a line of gin and opening a new distillery. But we get so little substance. It would be interesting to see how these characters interact in these particular environments. We can imagine... I had a fly there. Hey look, this book is actually useful for something. I just killed a bug. We can imagine what an etiquette class would look like. So to see Alesia engage in that environment, in that situation, does have potential for interest. But instead, we never get to see any of the lessons that she learns. We never get to see her interact with the class. We barely see her interact with anyone. There's like one other student named Tabitha who is struggling in the class, and Tabitha, like, despite a complete void of description, Tabitha has more of an impact in the scene because she's trying not to look bored. The story seems to have a very basic element at play as part of James's writing style: lack of substance. She gives us the basics of Alesia's etiquette classes or Maxim's job, but very little detail underneath the surface. Ideas are listed, but never described or detailed. All Maxim ever seems to do for his job is tell Kara how to decorate certain places, and he has no apparent connection to those places. This demonstrates that James has an idea of what posh life is like, but couldn't detail it. Lists are not interesting. We need that emotional human element. We need to breathe life into our art. Hell, I try to do that with my videos, and I just review bad books online. Carol also says she's trying to organize Kit's memorial service, which is weird because he's been dead for over 2 months. Now, as the conversation continues between Caroline and Maxim, there's something to note about the way that James will utilize dialogue and how she doesn't do it to advance character, she does it to advance plot. The best dialogue will have both character and meaning to it, something that stays true to who the character is at their core, as well as illustrate the scene a little bit. Good Will Hunting and Dead Poets Society are both excellent examples of that done masterfully. But what James will do is she will just meander for a little while until she gets bored and then just abruptly changes the conversation and then just goes with that for a bit. For example, I'm going to read just one whole page in this book. Count how many times the subject just changes abruptly. This page starts with Maxim and Caroline discussing funeral or memorial service arrangements for Kit. Caroline huffs. Mary Ann's disappeared too. Perhaps they found some late winter sun together. Maybe. Do you have a guest list from the memorial service? Yes, I'll send it over. And can you add people? I'm waiting for your mother's additions. I told Rowena I'd write the eulogy. Can we discuss readings? Of course. Whenever. We're around. Alesia is on that etiquette course this week. Good. She'll feel more confident afterwards. And she should make some friends. Yeah. Are you worried? Caroline scoffs. For heaven's sakes, Maxim, she's a grown woman. I know, but the kidnapping, I shrug. What can I say? Alessia's safety is my priority. Of course. But she's here now, with you. She'll be fine. Incidentally, what did you say to Charlotte Hampshire at Dimitri's party? Nothing, she says far too quickly, and I hold my gaze. But I'm not sure I believe her. Caro, I arch a brow in warning. What did you say? Is this about the photograph? It's everywhere. Are you in trouble? Was that your intention? To cause trouble between Alesia and me? I glare at her, and the temperature between us drops to below 0. Caroline's eyes widen. No, why would I do that? She says in a gush of faux indignation. Is that what you think? Caro, I don't know what to think, but Alesia and I are fine. Stop fucking fearing, or there will be consequences. She bristles but stays silent, and I know she said something to Charlotte. And what's with you and Oliver? I ask to change the subject. What do you mean? She snaps. I don't know, but there's some weird energy between you. Oh, for goodness sake, you're coming across all woo-woo. I'd better go and get on with this work, she stands. Let me know if you hear from Rowena. Now, I forgot to mention there was a previous scene where someone had photographed Maxim at the party when Charlotte was kissing him, and that just got out, tabloids and all. But by my count, there are at least 3 different times where the conversation just changes abruptly. Not because it feels natural for the characters, but because James just wanted to touch on something else and didn't know how to smoothly transition into another conversation. There's something to be said about the tempo of a conversation. How well the characters talk, how natural it sounds, and how well they jump from topic to topic are all critical things to consider when making your story flow well. James has yet to understand that, as this entire page demonstrates. The conversation between Caro and Maxim is information the reader already knows, so it's repetitive. It jumps from topic to topic abruptly and without any connective tissue, and it isn't interesting because these two have no distinct character qualities. There's so little life in what they say and do. The mood of this conversation goes all over the place, changing with very little lead-up or satisfying conclusion. If the dialogue comes across like you're trying to advance the plot instead of the characters, you should probably stop to reconsider what you're writing. Almost done. We're on chapter 24, page 320. And so far, nothing has really happened. There is thunder outside, so good timing. Do forgive if that happens. Alesia steps out and decides to go visit her grandmother's brother, so I guess he's the great uncle, or grunkle.
Grunkle Stan, why did you write this?
Because I regularly commit massive tax fraud.
And while she's out, Maxim gets a phone call from Letitia, who does in fact confirm that they are legally married. So the drama that we got from Rowena and her boy toy was just empty nothingness. Alesia finds her grunkle, and he is a perfectly charming man who welcomes her into his home with open arms and asks all sorts of questions to try to catch up. Good bit of character there. A little bit of fun. What's a little bit odd is that he apparently hasn't heard from his sister in a little while and doesn't know that she died. Strangely enough, though, he apparently never had an address for his sister, but she would write occasionally, which is how Tobias knew who Alesia was. The way he describes it, it sounds like there was some degree of estrangement, but it doesn't sound like like he and Virginia were on bad terms or anything, so I'm not sure why they contacted each other so infrequently. This sounds like James wrote herself into a corner and didn't even try to smooth it out. The sad thing is that there are a lot of better options for something like this. He could have been a shut-in. He could have been antisocial and cut off from the family. He could have been exiled from the family for some reason. Cut off from his sister. I don't know, but there are a lot of better, easier solutions that don't conjure as many plot holes as this does. While Alesia is away, Maxim arrives home and actually tries calling out, "Honey, I'm home," for a change. And he does start to worry about where Alesia is, but reminds himself that she can look after herself because she handled Rowena and she handled Grisha. So in that way, he is slightly improving. We've got something of a character arc, I guess, if you want to be very generous with terms. But unfortunately, he kind of deflates that progress when he sends her this as a text message. "Where are you? The flat is cold and lonely without you." I can understand him being concerned with the kidnapping, but the way that he tries to twist this makes him sound clingy and dependent. If he wanted to find out where she was or when she was going to be back, a better way to approach that would be if he texted, "I just got home, I'll cook dinner tonight, let me know when you're on your way back so I know when to start." You see, that way he's looking for input without being invasive. Plus, we know he can cook thanks to like one scene from the Mister. But if you thought that Maxim actually was going through a character arc and was improving, well, your argument immediately falls flat when Alesia does arrive home. Suddenly, the key sounds in the door, and it opens to reveal Alesia. She looks fine. When we lock eyes, her warm smile lights up the darkened hallway in my heart. My relief and anger seize the day in equal measure. Thank fuck she's safe. But as she steps into the hall, my anger triumphs and my cry echoes off the walls. "Where the fuck have you been?" Now I understand that Maxim is anxious, and this is probably just another stumbling block plot point that's going to resolve itself in 2 pages, but this shows how little Maxim actually trusts Alesia. So it does show not only is he not growing as a character, but how little these two actually work as a couple. Even worse, the routine explosion of anger from Maxim, even if it's coming from a place of concern, before he even tries to get Alessia's side, could be seen as abusive. I don't think that's what's really going on, but there's an interpretation that some people will probably have. Maxim has done this more than once now, and to a trafficking victim. Not a good look.
It's all your fault! All your fault! We warned you! We warned you about us!
Alesia freezes as I stride toward her, wanting to vent my spleen. England, y'all got some weird-ass phrases over there. Now, here's something worrying. Alesia immediately concedes to what's going on. She doesn't put up any defenses. She doesn't counter any of Maxim's attitude or volume. She just explains, "I'm sorry, my phone died," and that's kind of like rolling over and exposing your belly a little too early. The problem is, Maxim said this to someone who, was supposed to be severely traumatized by a whole host of different things, and never demonstrates that. So, instead, is this a sign that Alesia is just getting used to Maxim's outbursts? That's not a healthy sign of a good relationship. And Maxim doesn't, pull back and apologize, realize that he's overreacted or something. He keeps pressing Alesia for answers, and she just grins like she's used to this. "Where were you?" She grins. "If you promise not to be mad, I'll tell you." No, I don't promise. Not at all. I'm mad already. You have a disturbing tendency to put yourself in perilous situations. Tell me.
Tell me!
Except, no she doesn't? Alesia does get in trouble sometimes, but not really as a result of her own actions. Let's not forget that the reason she was in trouble in the last book, when Dante and Yili, or whatever their names were, found her at Maxim's place, Maxim left her alone in Cornwall, I think it was. And then Algernon abducted Alesia while Maxim left for somewhere. Meanwhile, in this book, she left with a supposed mobster, but made it home safely and went to talk to her grunkle, and made it home safely again. Alesia isn't the one putting herself in danger. Maxim leaving her when the plot needs him to is. The only time she's really gotten herself into trouble was when she inadvertently got herself trafficked into the UK, but that one instance does not reflect a particular pattern of anything. So Alesia explains that she went off to visit her grunkle, and this calms Maxim down, so she offers to cook dinner, and they start talking some more. And at some point, Alesia gets a letter from the Royal College of Music. She has an audition lined up. Oh boy! But as soon as they get that good news, there is a knock on the door. Maxim goes to check it out, and it's Applejack.
Applejack!
Hello, Englishman, Antigone says, with an arrogance and swagger that makes me want to deck him. What the hell are you doing here? I have come to see you. Me? Why? Aren't you going to invite me in? No, I'm going to tell you to fuck off. And they say the English are so polite. He steps in, and contrary to how I feel, I let him.
But why, though?
And Real Monsters is just here to stir the pot a little bit with some plot points that have been long since resolved, like how Maxim and Alesia's marriage is not legal, or how Alesia is not actually pregnant like he was told, or how the English have not been treating Alesia well, which can't really be substantiated outside of like a few paparazzi or something. But according to this book, the paparazzi aren't really people anyway, so who cares what they think? The castle even brings up the old photograph of Charlotte kissing Maxim and like tries to say that this is proof of him having an affair, and it's like, this has been resolved. Why are you here? Stop it.
What the hell's happening?
Ma'am, OP just posted critical levels of thirst.
These ratings are off the charts!
How much pussy does this motherfucker get?
We read 0 pussy, ma'am.
Dear God.
And then he leaves, having accomplished nothing, just wasting the reader's time. Like, honestly, there is something of a potential reason for why he might be here, but I don't have anything in the text to actually substantiate this headcanon. We'll get to it in a little bit. There might be a reason he's here, but I don't have any proof to back it up. So they get dickweed out like they should have at the start, and they just go on with their lives. Maxim is dealing with some business. Alesia goes off to her etiquette classes, but while she's there, Maxim starts walking home and notices that he's being followed. Oh my God, was this moment disappointing. I'm about to head into the shower when the external buzzer sounds. What now? It better not be a reporter. In the hall, I answer the intercom. Hello? Hello, Alesia, please. A soft, hesitant, feminine voice rasps. Who is this? Friend. Alesia, friend, please. A quiet desperation in her tone raises the hairs on my neck. English is not her first language. 6th floor, use the lift. I buzz her in. We'll see who this is. Now, I imagine a good portion of you have already figured out who this is and what this is leading to. It was tremendously disappointing that this little plot point was concluded without anyone in the cast having to lift a goddamn finger. On the very next page, Maxim asks her name, and the woman says her name is Bluriana. Rather than rely on the investigator that Alesia had hired, rather than get an answer from Tom's detective agency, rather than have the British police do anything, the kidnapping victim just magically shows up at Maxim's door.
I've lost it now!
I gotta be careful, I am screaming myself hoarse here. Can we just get one single plot point that isn't resolved with a simplistic hand wave or an inordinate amount of luck? Each moment of potential interest is just this low-effort release that causes no waves or consequences. There are somehow no stakes in any of these situations. Where is the story? Every single solution in this book can be accurately summed up by Ryan George.
Is that going to be hard to do? Actually, it's going to be super easy. Barely an inconvenience.
So Bluriana waits at Maxim's apartment while waits for Alesia to get back. They start chatting. They're like, Bluriana admits that she was rescued by the English police and she's now staying with an English family in a safe house as part of a charitable organization. Cool. But it would be nice if the characters had actually done something in order to be involved in this, rather than the plot just kind of land on their feet. They all go to bed, and the next morning, Maxim wakes up and Bluriana is in bed with them. Not for like any scandalous reasons, but apparently she just didn't want to be alone at night. And apparently Maxim keeps Alesia and Blariana safe from bad dreams. I thought the little dragon did that. You know, the line in context isn't bad. It's this little stuffed toy that Alesia has, but I forgot what it was. So when it was introduced earlier in the book, I thought the little dragon was a vibrator. He does, but you do too. You always do. She strokes my cheek and her fingers brushing my stubble. And the contact of her skin on mine and her sweet words lead directly to my dick.
Oh, you dirty bitch, work the shaft.
Later that day, Alesia talks to Maxim and suggests that they go talk to Letitia for help in order to expedite Blariana's case for asylum. Apparently, Blariana doesn't want to return to Albania. She's been traumatized, understandable, and returning to Albania wouldn't work in her favor. She's very young, he says. Does she want to go back to Albania? No, she will be shunned. The stigma. Alesia's voice trails off. Wow, that's awful. Her parents? Alesia shakes her head in answer to his unspoken question. You know, after a while, a pattern is on display. I don't think it's fair to try to make a blanket statement from, like, a single instance of something. If you've got one male character who's abusive, it's not fair to say that all men in a story are abusive when you've got plenty of other men who are very much not. But the pattern that we've got on display right now is that every single man from Albania is kind of a piece of shit. Every single time Albanian men are mentioned, it makes them sound detestable, and I don't think that's a fair assessment. And granted, I'm not an expert when it comes to Albania, I just like to give people the benefit of the doubt. But every single time James takes the opportunity to talk about men in Albania, or Albania in general, she makes it sound horrible. And she claims that she liked it. I'm not convinced of that. I think that she, like, deep down actually hates it. Blariana's parents won't have sympathy for their daughter when she was trafficked? The fuck is wrong with them? Moving on, Blariana goes back to her hosting family. Maxim and Alesia go out to a farm or something. While they're at the farm, one of the shepherds named Danny talks to Alesia. Apparently there's a legend about the farm that Maxim never told her. Ah, that boy, Danny scoffs. Legend has it the first Countess Isabel encountered a stag out in the forest shortly after her wedding to the first Earl. The stag spoke to her and told her that if her family cared for the wild herd, then she would be blessed with a long life and many children. And that's exactly what happened. The Trevithick estate has long been a haven for the deer. They're seen as a sign of good luck. That's why the two stags are the support in the family coat of arms. They symbolize protection for the earldom, the estate, and the family, my lady.
What does that have to do with anything?
You know, a lot of the reason why the plot lines and the characters worked in Downton Abbey and neither work in this is because Downton Abbey utilized relatable plot lines. Obnoxious co-workers, unrequited romances, troubles with the law, patriotism, the effects of war on the citizenry, financial issues, medical tragedies, and many, many more. The Misses is about how rich Maxim is and how lucky Alesia is for marrying him. In Downton, the main family being rich was a small portion of who the Granthams were, and they were not the entire cast. In the Mr. and the Mrs., Maxim's entire personality is being a rich fuckboy. He is nothing beyond that. Alesia starts helping out around the farm, and Maxim starts digging around inside the house, and eventually, somehow, comes across Kit's old journal. And he opens it up to the latest entry, hoping that it may provide some answers to what happened to his brother. January 2nd, 2019. Fuck, fuck, fuck. 1,000 times fuck. I'm fucked. Fucking Rowena. First my wife, now my mother. And that's actually the close of a chapter, so I guess it's supposed to be something of a cliffhanger. Now, of course, that in and of itself doesn't really give a lot of answers, and shortly after this journal was written, Kit was dead. So Maxim does have the opportunity to flip through the book and try to find out some more of what's going on. What do you mean, first my wife? Was Caroline being unfaithful? Because Maxim knows that he and Caroline didn't bang until after Kit was dead. Because, you know, if you're going to bang your brother's wife, you at least gotta be respectful about it. But Maxim has this crucial plot point interrupted when Danny walks in and asks for help out in the barn because they've got 27 ewes lambing right now. And even though the journal entry is vastly more interesting than going out and watching a bunch of sheep give birth, Maxim decides I'd better go and help too. Because heaven forbid we actually have something that grabs our attention for longer than 40 seconds. A bunch of nothing happens on the farm, and eventually, I guess they go back to the apartment in London where a police sergeant walks in to talk to Maxim because there's been a development. Congratulations on your recent marriage, he says, and offers me a kind smile. So far, so good. Thank you. What can I do for you? He blows out a quick breath and sets down his teacup, his expression now grim. I've brought news, my lord. Unfortunate news. Earlier this week, the 2 men we apprehended at your rental property were murdered while on remand. I thought I should come and inform you. The case against them will lie on file, but neither you nor Lady Trevithick will need to testify in court. Okay, so we'll just add that to the pile of other plot points that just got dropped because someone pushed the easy button. So I guess now James doesn't need to write a courtroom scene or something, or have Alesia confront her attackers at all, or anything like that. Just keep slapping that easy button. And this is something that just annoys me in the way that James has characterized Alesia through the entire book. Now, I said in my review of The Mister that James is not obligated to write a story about trafficking awareness or things like that. It's her book. She can write about whatever she wants. The problem is, at this point, she's doing a disservice to the entire concept in the way that she has dropped all of Alessia's trauma. When you consider the mountain of stuff that Alesia has had to contend with just in the last 2 months alone, she has been trafficked into England, homeless, desperate on others for both money and support, attacked in Cornwall when Dante and Ely showed up out of nowhere, kidnapped by Anteater, who then stuffed her in a trunk multiple times, forced her around at gunpoint, almost assaulted her, and dragged her back to Albania, where it looked like she was going to be forced into marriage with the guy. All of a sudden, at the start of this book, Alesia is cured of all her trauma. She at no point ever has to really contend with anything that she has suffered through. And there are ways to work through that. If Alesia had extended times in therapy or something, if this book jumped forward like 6 months, at the bare minimum, maybe I could give this a pass. But the fact of the matter is, James wrote an incredibly traumatized character, or a character who by all rights would have been extremely traumatized by what she went through, and then decided that it was inconvenient for the sake of her plot, so she just snapped her fingers and did a hard reset. This is like in Ready Player 2 when Ernest Cline had to do a hard reset on who Wade was because his characterization at the end of the first book didn't fit who he needed in the second book. Your characters go through an extended journey, and their past doesn't just magically vanish because it's inconvenient. You need to build on who they were before. The Wheel of Time does this brilliantly with multiple characters. And this is what I was talking about with Applesauce having a reason to be in England, because Maxim assumes that he was involved and may have murdered Dante and Ely. Again, I've got no proof that this is actually what happened. It's just pure speculation on Maxim's part on one page, but it's possible. We don't get any conclusion to this mystery. Why are they dead? What happened? How did they die? Don't know. Who's even involved? Don't know. This is tremendously disappointing, and yet we're not done.
But wait, there's more.
The police sergeant also returns a Tesco shopping bag, which contains Maxim's laptop and sound mixers, which were stolen from his apartment in the last book when Dante and Ely were looking for Alesia there. How did you come by these? The gear was in the back of their car, the BMW. We were holding the car and these as evidence, but now the case is defunct. He shrugs. The serial numbers match those of your missing items. I thought I'd returned them. Thank you. I don't think that's how police evidence works, but why research that? It's not the first time James hasn't bothered looking into something. And there's one more thing. Turns out there's an envelope inside with Alessia's old passport. A bunch of nothing happens. Maxim considers burning Kit's journal for some reason. Alesia has her music audition. Rowena wants to postpone Kit's memorial until autumn. For her audition, Alesia plays Vali e Vogo by an Albanian composer, Fame Ibrahimi. Probably butchered that. But the music is described as bright and expressive, an homage to an Albanian folk song, which is probably the only concrete evidence of James ever saying anything positive about Albania. And then we get a scene where Maxim, Alesia, Caroline, Marianne, and Rowena all go to Trevelyan House. And the way this is set up, I think it's supposed to be the climax of the story, where we get a few answers to a few of the plot threads that are mildly unresolved by this point. Rowena actually tries to play it nice by walking up to Alesia and saying, "You've had quite the effect on my son." Why? Because now he has only a single source for getting his dick wet? Seriously, aside from like monogamy, Maxim is the same character he was at the start of The Mister. Anyway, Rowena starts some sob story about how in the 80s she was a party girl and was, by her own admission, greedy, shall we say. Apparently Maxim's father, John, doted on her, but Rowena was with him as well as some musician. We don't get a name, we don't get anything about him, but apparently the musician got her pregnant and left her. And also it turns out the musician was gay. Make of that what you will. And Rowena decided to admit the truth to Kit one day. He was furious and went out on his motorbike and never came back. But Rowena went back to John, who was willing to support her, and they eventually got officially married. Caroline sympathizes with Rowena and says that she let him down as well, and Rowena knows, but doesn't judge Caroline because Kit could be difficult. Maxim takes Caroline to one side eventually and gets her side of the story for clarification purposes. She peers down at her fingernails, then turns and slumps into the chair beside me. I did love him. I know you did. What did Rowena mean about him being difficult? Caroline sits up straight and peers at her fingernails again. She sighs. He was aloof and demanding, controlling, occasionally violent. What the fuck? With you? I ask, sitting up properly, as shock reverberates through every cell in my body. She nods and looks from her nails to the ceiling. Not often. You know, the key thing in writing a good climax is actually involving the protagonists of your story. So far, this entire scene has just been secondary characters walking up and explaining things to Maxim when he's not really involved, or for that matter, even really affected by the stories or the results. Carol also says that in order to spite him, she sought companionship elsewhere, and that she didn't think he would mind. But he did mind. Like, if he was really that bad, if he was really that controlling and occasionally violent, why would you assume that? And why are we getting this revelation so late into the story in such a way that it doesn't actually affect anything. Sure, this alters Maxim's perception of his older brother, but in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't change anything. Maxim isn't going to alter himself. He isn't going to change his behavior. This doesn't have an impact on his claim to the earldom. In fact, this strengthens his claim on the earldom, since Rowena was unfaithful and Kit was not from a legitimate marriage. Caroline also asks for Kit's journal because she hopes that he didn't hate her, and Maxim, having not read the journal, says, "I never got the impression he hated you." Literally 1 page ago, Maxim was shocked by the revelation that his brother was aloof, demanding, controlling, and occasionally violent. I don't think his viewpoint on Kit has a lot of merit. Eventually, everybody leaves, and Maxim and Alesia share a kiss, and it's not described well. My lips meet hers, and I lean her into the wall, and we kiss all the way to the 6th floor. Tongues and teeth and lips and love, it's all there in our kiss. This sounds like these two are kissing with their teeth. And I'm not saying you can't have like the occasional nibble or whatever, but I don't think that's what James is describing here. And this leads to another flat sex scene that opens with this. Alesia wants to taste him. All of him.
You never go ass to mouth.
So Alesia gets accepted into one of the colleges, the Royal College of Music, I think it is. I can't be bothered to remember. So she can get a student visa, which solves her immigration problems for now. But Caroline comes up with an additional thing, because apparently her father is a senior director at the Home Office, which will give her another visa or something. Oh boy, now she can go for a student visa, a family visa, and a whatever this is.
3 layers of protection.
So everything is on easy street. Maxim and Alesia never have to lift a finger to solve any of their problems. This is remarkably stupid. The two of them are packing up their apartment and getting ready to move into their new place. I think this is a 50 Shades reference, but Alesia pulls a pair of handcuffs out of like one of Maxim's bags, which like, okay, I'll let that one slide because whatever, the book is almost done anyway. We just have one chapter left, the epilogue. The book is almost done and the story never started. Alesia is giving a piano recital for class or something. The wedding anniversary is coming up. Alesia is like something of a rock star, and also she's pregnant, and Maxim's going to be father, and I don't care. So the central idea, if there's anything else that you should take away from this book, is that this is wonderful proof of the idea that no conflict means no story. This is true about just about every kind of storybook out there, including children's books. If you don't have some sort of conflict for characters to overcome, no one's going to find interest in your book. It doesn't have to be world-ending. It can be a small personal thing. Legends and Lattes, to bring that back, is a good example. The conflict there being that Viv is very inexperienced at running a coffee shop and keeps running into problems and needs to come up with creative solutions for them. Again, very engaging stuff. But so often, the characters will run into these minor problems, will oftentimes blow them out of proportion, or the problems get exaggerated to a ridiculous degree when they're solved so very quickly and with nary any effort on Maxim or Alessia's parts. I mean, honestly, out of all of the potential plot threads and brief moments of conflict that James toyed with, how many were solved by Maxim and Alesia actually doing something? I mean, yeah, they had the occasional conversation when they were butting heads, and that's fine, except those problems were written to be resolved almost immediately. I don't think they count. And something especially like a romance, even if you want to take away the erotica element of this book entirely, which you might as well have at this point, you were otherwise left with a very uneventful romance. Now, romance isn't going to have world-shattering stakes involved, typically, but you still need to have some degree of conflict or drama involved in order to make the story interesting and actually have the characters invested in the events. If they just putter around and come up with easy solutions or have solutions handed to them, you're not going to have any reason to actually get into the events of the book or invest yourself in the characters. Now, like I said before, Alesia is definitely the best character in this book. I will not be acknowledging any differing opinions on that matter. She's gone through the most, she's overcome the most. The problem is, now she's on cruise control and there's not really anything for her to do in the story. She's maybe like a step above being a sex object, but it really, like, I struggle to come up with anything definitive that happened to her in this story. She got married and moved to England, got into a college, met her grunkle. Boy, do you remember that? That sure led to something, and that's mostly it. Oh, there's the bit with Blariana, but like, Alesia wasn't actually involved in that, so I don't think that counts either. There was that one moment where she told Rowena off, and I did like that moment, but that's like a thimble of water in the middle of a desert. And then there's the matter of her being attracted to Maxim, but it doesn't feel like there's any real chemistry or connective tissue there. It feels like Alesia is just going along with this because Maxim is the first guy to give her any positive attention because every guy in Albania is a piece of shit. Last time I met a woman with a questionable taste in men like this, I proposed to her. Maxim's also on cruise control for pretty much the majority of the book. We don't really see him putting up with a lot. Like, his biggest issue in the story was, doesn't even feel right calling this a story, the book, was the anxiety he felt whenever Alesia was out of his line of sight. You can make that internal problem a good thing to overcome for a character arc. It doesn't always have to be an external threat. It can be, your character can have an internal struggle that he has to overcome, but James isn't aware that Maxim has to overcome this problem and never treats it as a problem beyond, you know, this minor I'm worried about my wife thing. He doesn't have a character arc. Like, the only thing that's changed is he's reduced the number of women he puts his dick inside of. That's not a character arc, that's designating a specific target. Caroline in this book jumps all over the place. She was this wanting, clinging muskrat of a person in the Mister, and in this one, she's just whatever the plot needs her to be in the moment. Initially, she's kind of trouble because she's jealous of Alesia getting Maxim, and in other scenes, she actually does a lot of work as an interior decorator to help Maxim in whatever the hell his day job is. And at the very end, she's a simpering, wilting flower because it turns out that Kit was actually a bastard. Marianne was something of a non-entity. She just showed up occasionally to explain things to Maxim that Rowena couldn't or wouldn't. So again, she was kind of inconsequential. Rowena was remarkably insufferable all the way up to the very end. Now, like I said, you can write a character like that. She doesn't have to be a nice person, but the very end was written as if it's supposed to be her redemption arc, and she doesn't earn it at all. She is way too rude and off-putting throughout the entire run of the book. She keeps building up all of this bad reputation. So when you get to the very end and you try to give her a pity party where she says, "Oh, but I'm sad because I cheated on my boyfriend at one point," it doesn't come off as sympathetic. It's like, yeah, and? Like, sure, you're sad about it. I understand that. I just don't care. I mean, I don't like Maxim as a character, but I don't think he deserved any of the crap that Rowena gave him throughout the book. And then there's Amberger, who shouldn't have even been in this book in the first place. Like, I thought Anglerfish was actually going to be some sort of romantic rival for Maxim at some point in the story. Like when I first got into it, and there was that introductory scene where he runs into Alesia and says the English are going to hate you, I thought at some point Alesia was going to be driven away from England, like emotionally or physically or something, and she was going to consider maybe I should just resign myself to Albania and marrying some douchebag. But as you could see, none of that happened. James thanked people for their input in researching certain topics like police procedurals or the visa application process. But those elements were used so sparingly that you could have glanced a Wikipedia article and gotten the same result. I'll believe the people she asked were experts in their fields, but James did a terrible job translating it to paper. At this point, I suspect that a lot of the people who enjoyed this book did so because of the sunk cost fallacy. They spent money on the book, so now they've got to double down on their investment and say, oh, of course it's good. If it wasn't, I'd look stupid for buying this. Look, you don't need to be ashamed. I bought this and I think this is terrible. Honestly, I'd give this a 1 out of 10. This was arduous to get through. Like I said, I forgot that I had finished this book after I read it. I just finished filming, like I'm at the tail end of filming a review. There are plenty of elements in this book that I promise you I have forgotten reading about. It's going to be a rediscovery while I'm editing. Also, James claims that she enjoyed Albania, but I don't buy it. She did nothing to really explore Albanian culture. Her husband apparently learned how to cook Albanian stew. That could have been something. We could have had a bit more about Albanian food just to get an idea of, what they're like, but instead we got bubble bread, whatever that is. When James writes, it's slow and uneventful, and when it isn't that, it's confusing. So I was ranting about this book to one of my patrons a while ago, and he came up with a pretty good observation, I thought. In the game Max Payne, you can occasionally pass by TVs and they're playing this schmaltzy soap opera called Lords and Ladies, where, you've got brief scenes of some over-dramatized soap opera nonsense.
But why, my love, why?
My lord, it is too dreadful. Do not force me to speak the words.
My lady, I beg of you, I must know. I would rather die than not know.
Yes, my lord, we should both be dead, for this shame is too great for the living. My lord, I am your long-lost sister.
I think the entirety of the Lords and Ladies script can be summed up in less than 3 minutes, can be read in less than 3 minutes throughout the entire game, and it has a much more dramatic storyline than anything in this. To write a great book, or to create any worthwhile piece of art, one must put their blood, sweat, and tears into a story. The characters must make the reader feel things. The world must feel vibrant and engaging. The prose must flow well. All of that requires incredible effort. James does not put blood, sweat, or tears into her writing. She barely puts in enough effort to claim she puts hair grease into her writing. This was the most meandering, asleep at the wheel narrative I've come across since probably The Mister. No effort, no story, no point. 1 out of 10, utter failure of a book. This is like bad smut written for the Victoria era. Bare ankles, how scandalous! But that is enough of this book and E.L. James's writing for now. We will probably see her return to this when Alesia's long-lost brother comes back into the picture, and it turns out that he's a wanted man who collects salamanders in his spare time. We'll call it the Weirdo. Anyway, fans have been suggesting for a good long while that I should read something good. And while I do have the occasional book that I enjoy in my spare time when I'm not reading trash, this next one might actually be a little different. It might be good, it might be terrible. Looking on BookTube and possibly on Book Talk, it has all sorts of mixed reviews. Some people are calling it the worst book of 2023, others are saying it's a refreshing take on the fantasy genre. So, join me next time when I review Fourth Wing, and you can find out how I feel about it. I'm not quite halfway done with it. I'm on chapter 18. I've already got a number of notes so far. Are these good things? Are they criticisms? You'll just have to wait and see. Like, you sound like a pig.